Please, we'll start with the pledge.
Because somebody was up.
Pledge allegiance.
Flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get going, Tom has a little announcement he'd like to make.
I would like to have the board observe a moment of silence. Margaret Peg Donahue died a couple of days ago at the great age of 90. She was the first female on the Board of Selectmen. She was a 3-time member of Charter Revision Commissions. So I would ask us all to observe a moment of silence for her.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Review the minutes. Oh, sorry, public audience comes first. Any members? Joan, please let me finish
I always have something
I know you're going to want to say something, but let me
like
finish
it
it.
or not, I am here at your service.
Get up here and talk, Joan.
The
Get up.
pay is excellent. I love it.
It matches our page.
I think I'll get a merit raise for this one. Joan Coe, 26 Whitcomb Drive. I would urge this commission to have the courage and conviction to change the charter to a professional town manager with all the responsibilities afforded the position. Changing the charter to a town manager will require a single focus to make sure that this living document is manageable and workable in Simsbury. Simsbury is no longer a small town. We are living in a complex environment with issues that require professional management. The charter change should be forwarded to the Board of Selectmen with a period of discussion and education on the merits of a town manager, and then sent to a referendum for a vote. A charter with a town manager would automatically have changes in oversight, and many concerns that have been discussed would be eliminated, such as term limits for a first selectman, since the charter would be governed by a contractual professional town manager. The town manager should be a town resident, giving the people confidence that many of the services and taxes would also impact their daily lives. In order to increase the applications, a 6-month time limit would be imposed for residency. The town manager of Avon lives in Avon. Recently, the town had 2 employees in key positions leave the town for another job. Why is the town having a problem with retention? Presently, our town is being governed by committee, imposing many extra hours of meetings on the department heads who are required to attend these meetings. And I have 2 exhibits for you. One is Simsbury. There are 3 pages of the calendar of events of meetings for Simsbury, which is huge. And then we have the calendar of events for Avon, which is minuscule compared to what we have. So I'll pass this around as Exhibit 1 and 2, Exhibit A and B. And I also have another exhibit from Hiram Peck, who was our town planner, on his observations of how much time he spent at various activities. Presently, our town is being governed by committee, imposing many extra hours of meetings on the department heads who were required to attend these meetings from 7:30 in the morning to late at night. The printout that I showed you is Simsbury meetings and meetings in Avon, with the town manager shows fewer meetings and more accomplishments. I'm submitting these documents for your review. A professional town staff should have the ability to provide a professional insight and direction without having oversight within a structure of meetings with amateurs giving directions to professional staff. On May 10th, 2015, Hiram Peck wrote a memo to the Board of Selectmen, proposed town hall hours. There was no response. It states, and I quote, "My personal share of meeting hours is 132 hours a year. This equates to 3.3 weeks unpaid overtime on a yearly basis. Represented staff may take comp time. Non-union staff, as I understand it, may not. Joe Mancini, finance director of the town, is leaving for another job. Whether this was a personal issue or a professional issue with continual increases in attendance of meetings, this leaves the town without financial leadership at a time when there is new leadership in the Board of Finance during the budget process. Since we lost a stellar finance director in Kevin Kane due to politics, the town has difficulty finding and retaining a director of finance for the town. It appears to me that Simsbury political government, governing by committee in the first selectman's position, might be a deterrent for professional applicants and retentions. I would hope that a thorough search would be initiated in a professional website. I would also conclude that professional employees would rather work for a professional town manager than a politically elected first selectman without any public policy training. I urge the members of the Charter Revision Commission to institute a path to professional leadership in the position of a town manager and join Avon, Granby, and Farmington with a town manager, and thank you very much. And I also publish these things on Simsbury Patch, Simsbury Topics, and also on @JoanCo at Twitter.
I'm going to give
So-
this to Tom and have him make copies for the record and send it out.
I would appreciate it, thank you.
I'm not going to read it now. Just send copies out to everybody, okay, thank you. Ms. Clark, please.
Good evening. Robert Kalishman, 971 Hot Meadow Street, Simsbury. I'd like permission from the chairman and the board to read into the record my letter dated to the chairman and the committee of 7 February. And it started with, "Dear members, in my letter to you and the 2016 Charter Revision Commission, I requested that the town constable be restored to the town of Simsbury and its charter. The more I looked into this section 703 of the present charter and studied the working drafts, and the only finding I read is constable, I have been eliminated no reason other than 2 lawyers who appeared before the Charter Commission had little to say other than Attorney Hagney telling the Commission he could not recall. I have reviewed the Connecticut General Statutes, Title VII, Municipalities, and Constable, in Chapter 98, Town Manager. Again, I ask your support, our citizens Simsbury, and to restore constables to our town charter for the benefit of Simsbury citizens and stop this good old boy system which I and Sam Adams, John Adams, would call privileged class. Enclosed you will find a report provided by the Connecticut AG on the constable, which dates back to the 17th century. Now, in addition to that, on March 9th, 1999, the Attorney General, and incidentally, this is on the letterhead of George Jepson, but at the time, the Attorney General for the state of Connecticut was Senator Blumenthal. And at that time, it had gone through Section 783, service of process, liability. Constables shall have the same power in the towns to serve and execute all lawful legal directs to them as sheriffs have in their respective counties. The last part, sheriffs has been deleted, and the law is now that constables have the same power that anybody to serve processes, and I study that. Now, and I went aside, and I think I enclosed enclosures to each and every member of this board, more or less helping you in your decision of where everything goes, because I know everybody has an opinion. So I tried to make it as easy as possible, and of course I do have a reason for it. I'd like the constables to be restored. Now, the only other thing I'd like to comment on, And it was Dr. Rinaldi's comments that there's not anything done in this town unless one committee or the other committee decides that they want and a deal is made. And really, I think the citizens of Simsbury have been left out of this, and the constables being eliminated with no discussion. There's no reason. I researched it, and the only reasons in there, every change that they made, they had a reason for, except the constables. When they came to the constables, the only word in it that I could find was eliminate. That's hypocrisy. That's really using an iron fist on people. And I think the people of Simsbury deserve more. And like I say, let's prove once and for all that we have 3 members of the independent party that sit here or that are independents. We have Democrats and we have Republicans. And let's send a message to Simsbury that you're not controlled and you don't have to report back to the town chair or to their parties respectively, and that you could make a decision based on your own initiatives. And that's all I'm saying, and I agree. And there'll be other members here, I think, that will follow me through on the Board of Education issue. And when I heard that speak, I never paid that too much attention to it, but I noticed there were certain things done on finance and education. But the way it is, when he came up with Dr. Rinaldi's explanation, you have to let the public speak. You just can't take everything for granted. It's not our way. And I don't want to grandiose or anything, but I was just given a medal from the Korean government for my service during the Korean War. They gave me a medal. And believe me, if some of the guys that we left over there knew what you people were doing, they'd haunt you. Because a lot of these kids, right out of school, civics, history, they feel we have the best system. And we fought against a system that was totalitarian. And believe me, and I feel proud that I stopped, and I and my comrades stopped what they called the Chinese Black Panther Army. And at a place called Hangnam, we took 91,000 Korean refugees out of the claws of the Chinese army and took them and brought them back to Busan. And 91,000 Koreans were free. Otherwise, who knows what would have happened. They were with the Americans coming out, and that was the biggest mistake they could have made. We took them back, and we gave them freedom. And I'm very proud of that. But I'm also proud of Simsbury, and I feel that you gentlemen have an obligation to the citizens, and I would like the constable be restored. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other, ma'am?
I think it's quite clearly enough.
I need your name and address.
Maria Ecke, 8 Glenbrook Drive, West Simsbury, Connecticut, 06092.
Can you repeat that? Marie what?
Ecke, E-C-K-E,
And what's your address?
Maria,
And your address.
8 Glenbrook, one word. And we don't know if it's road or drive. That hasn't been determined yet. Would you, anybody in this room, kindly raise their hand if they've been a department head in a town municipal service? How many would like to raise their hand if they worked for either a town manager that was an actual manager or a board of selectmen? To contradict what Joan co, or at least dispute what John Coe says. I've worked with both systems. I do believe the citizens of Simsbury should have some kind of choice. And I hope you vote that way, because I do believe we're a better town. We've brought in people here. I know I physically convinced people that have headed your library, that have been on town boards, because I had enough gumption to know that Simsbury was a nice town, and I moved here. And I brought some of those people with me from the southern end of the state. So I've had experience with all kinds of different things in municipalities and towns. And I do think the people of Simsbury should have a vote. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please. There you go.
It's William A. Estelle, Estell, 11 Laurel Lane. Ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to kind of follow up and reiterate on the comments I made at the close of the last meeting, and wanted to highlight why, for myself, and I think I speak for a few others, why the Board of Ed is important to this town, and why the citizens of Simsbury have a vested interest in how we select and manage that body. A quick little bit of history, just to let you know my background. As I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I moved to this town with a newborn and my first wife 19 years ago, and we bought in Simsbury because of the school system. We did our homework, we did our research, and we wanted to live in this community. Eventually had 2 little girls. They went to Terriffill. Fabulous start to their education. I got divorced. The girls left town. I did everything I could to stay in this town so I could have, a rock and a foundation in Simsbury. I got remarried. I have a stepson, put him into our school system, and I was lucky enough to be able to peel away one of my daughters from a school system south of us and bring her back into the town so that she could graduate from Simsbury. I recognized very early and have reinforced the fact that the reason why the town is what it is a major factor of our Board of Ed and the school system that goes with it. The Board of Ed drives our property values. It also drives our tax liabilities, which kind of leads into the financial responsibility of the town. Madams Glassman and Heavner have done a fabulous job in the last few years of managing the operating budget for the town, which allows the Board of Ed that elasticity and the flexibility to take the available funds and do what they can. And they've done a reasonably good job at managing their budgets. And one of the ways I kind of track and monitor that is as long as the overall mill rate of the town stays reasonably within either a CPI or the growth rate of the grand list, okay, the town's doing fairly well. Unfortunately, we're running now into a situation where that's going to become harder and harder and harder to do. And my concern is that as the increased cost pressures start building up both on the town operating side and more importantly on the much larger part of the town budget and the Board of Ed, there are going to be issues that we as citizens are really going to want to start having a voice in. As was mentioned a couple weeks ago, I've had the pleasure and the honor to be part of the Facilities Enrollment Task Force, and I think we've done a great job of working with the Board of Ed and working with members of the Education community in town. We've done a really good job of addressing the physical plant and the needs of the town based on projected enrollment. But we also have personnel-related issues that eventually are going to have to be addressed as the enrollment drops. We have the issue of potential admin bloat within the education structure within the town as well. As the enrollment figures start to drop, we also have to look at how we're the admin staff. We need to start thinking about perhaps outsourcing or subcontracting non-core educational services in the town to perhaps save some money. The point is, this is why it's important that the residents of Simsbury have a direct say and involvement in the structure of our Board of Ed through a direct election, because there are going to be these issues that are going to come up. And today, as has been mentioned previously, we don't really have a direct voice in the structure of the Board of Ed based on how the selection process is currently structured. And so I implore this committee, and I really look forward to seeing what legal counsel has come back with as to their the different models and the different options that are going to be presented to this body. I really hope that we can look at the structure and perhaps moderate or change the way that the town has an opportunity to select the members of the Board of Ed. So, thank you.
Can I ask a question? And I do appreciate your comments, and the whole issue of Board of Ed, term limits, what have you, it's been coming up. And I've looked at the emails and I've listened to people talk, and I'm personally struggling with, from a charter perspective, what's the problem that you're asking us to solve? Because what I hear you saying is it's a finance issue. Your concerns are more financially driven than they are charter driven. So I'm just trying to get some clarity around that.
I'm going to interrupt for 1 minute. We're really not in the situation now where we should have a whole discussion on this.
But the reason I'm asking the question is I'm trying to understand.
I'm sure when we discuss the Board of Ed, we'll figure it out.
Okay,
Yeah.
but it's okay. But I'm confused about what's the problem you're asking us to solve.
It's the structure of the Board of Ed and how we select the Board of Ed, which I believe the charter,
Is that a symptom? Because ultimately you want to start to address the financial issues, or it's just you want better representation on the board?
A direct representation on the board from the town so that the citizens of the town have the ability through the elected process to voice their opinion of the upcoming issues that may be coming, in the future issues. But I believe this commission has the ability to at least present to the town an alternative structure for the BOE. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any other members of the public? Mr. Rinaldi, Dr. Rinaldi, Mr. Rinaldi?
My name is Mike Rinaldi, R-I-N-A-L-D-I, 32 Pinnacle Mountain Road. I came here last year, last couple of weeks ago, I came here. I wasn't going to come, but somebody asked me, and they were talking about term limits on the Board of Education, and I thought that was ridiculous, and I still think it's ridiculous. I know some towns where they can't even find people to run on these boards, and if you're doing a good job, you could do it forever, as far as I'm concerned. And because of this gentleman's question, he's absolutely right. There is nothing in the charter here that says anything about the way the Board of Education should be comprised other than a minority-majority representation. The Democrats and Republicans are the problem, okay? They're the problem. They do not want to give the voters in this town a choice. He feels that if the board member wasn't doing well, he wouldn't renominate him. I don't know why he could do that, and I can't vote him off. He believes that if I vote for somebody...
Excuse me, Mr. Rinaldi, could you not point at people?
Yeah.
Please?
This gentleman believes...
Thank you.
And I'll point. This gentleman believes at one of these meetings, he said that if we were given a choice, we'd ruin the Board of Education. He did say that.
That's not what I said.
Tell me what you said.
That comment in the minutes, which I don't think was correct.
This really
but-
isn't time.
Tell me what you said then.
Excuse me, this really isn't time for dialogue.
Okay, but it meant something like that. Anyways, what I'm here to tell you is that in a two-party system, which I strongly believe in, that we, the voters, should have a choice. Now, the Ayatollah Khomeini, he recently has constructed the number of people who are going to be running for his council of electors. He picks them out, just like the Republicans and Democrats do. But he picked 2,000 to run for 200 seats. Even the Iranians get a choice. We don't get a choice. We got members who sit on that board. I don't know why they're there. There's one guy who sleeps during the meetings. He's got his eyes closed. He's never said a word in a year. They just passed the budget unanimously, 2.2%. They got almost a 3% decrease in enrollment. CPI is 1.4. Okay? Nobody on that board understands physical restraint. You can't lose 5,700. You can't have 5,700 students go to 4,100 students over a 15-year period where the average CPI during those 12 years or 15 years has been 1.6%, and your average budget has increased 2.1%, and you've had a 2.7% decrease in average yearly enrollment. You can't do that. You can't have three principals at the high school when your enrollment is decreasing tremendously. So what I'm trying to say is that we have an educational system that's great. We provide for it wonderfully. But in the past 10 years, we should have got a break. There should have been some physical restraint up there. There's not. When you vote 2.2%, you look at the budget they just passed. We're stuck with that thing. The Board of Finance is going to most likely cut it a little bit. But still, our budgets are increasing over $800,000 per year. And our decrease in enrollment is more than 2.5% per year. And we should see some relief someplace. Now, we can't vote these guys off the board. We can't even let them compete against each other and tell us, why do you want all-day kindergarten? Tell me. Tell me why you want it. I'm all for it. I came out for all-day kindergarten before the board did. But how are you going to fund it? Oh, we'll fund it. He won't even get a choice. Sorry, I can't point. He did not even get a choice. They went around his board.
Okay, the nose is just as good.
They went around his board, right? They went around the board.
Active discussions, as you know.
Yeah. They went around the board. They went around the voters. How did they get the money? They got it from the state. How did they get it from the state? With decreasing enrollment, they decided, well, we'll take 40 kids from Hartford at $6,000 apiece. That's going to cost us $5 million over the next 12 years. I mean, you got to know that if you're on the Board of Education. If we're in the business of educating, if you want to increase the time spent at the high school and the amount of periods they have to 8 from 7, then you got to lengthen the school day. If you cut the school day, you're cutting periods. And when you have teachers who are teaching 5 out of 7 periods, and all of a sudden they're teaching 5 out of 8, you got to hire staff. Now, those things were not discussed. I listened to all the board meetings on TV. They're not discussed unless they're in private session. But Board of Education has to speak to these things because we, the people, listen to them. We want to know how you're doing things or why you're doing things. Now, as to why we're even here tonight, we're here because we had a constitutional crisis. Not a constitutional crisis, a charter crisis. The previous first selectman decided she wanted to professionalize her department, which I think is great. By professionalizing, she hired a consultant. The consultant came back with the recommendation of changing the people's responsibility in the charter. And she changed her duties as responsibility to the charter. So all of a sudden, that board, this Board of Selectmen, was no longer in compliance with the charter. So they had to call you. They had to call a new charter. In fact, Mrs. Glassman tell you why you're here. You're here because, Kings got screwed up. And it was unanimous, both Republicans and Democrats. They all voted for it. Because Mrs. Glassman, I think, knew that she was grieving one way or another. And that she recognized that this is a hard job she had. She wanted to professionalize it. She wanted basically the equivalent of a town manager form of government. Maybe not totally town manager form. Because you know why? When she was elected in 1991, I think it was, nobody ever expected her to get elected. It's a Republican town. There were Republicans all the time. She got elected because the last guy really screwed up. And he got thrown out. I don't know if you remember him. You do. And, well...
I was living in California.
Oh.
Four-year tour of duty.
You knew about it. But anyways, he did a terrible job. And Miss Glassman was put up. No one ever thought she'd get elected. She was sort of like, we got to run somebody. And she got elected. Guess what happened right after that? A previous select woman, she told me this story. So I have to believe she told me the truth. She said Miss Glassman was up against it. She had no knowledge of how to run a town. But she said, I volunteered to go down there and help her learn the job. Okay? And you know the history of Mrs. Glassman. She's done a fantastic job. But I think she recognized, now that she was probably going to go, that I better professionalize this thing because I don't want anything to happen to the next person like what happened to me. Because I was totally unprepared to run a town of Simsbury. So the question is, do you want a town manager? Or don't you want a town manager? I argue with my friends all the time. Most of I say if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But in my profession, we have a saying, if we do you no good, we should at least do you no harm. And if we screw up, we get thrown off our staff and we get sued. When you screw up in Simsbury, you get reappointed. So the question is, you got a big job. The safe thing is to do is to get a town manager. That's safe. But let me tell you, you can't vote a town manager out of office. We could have voted Mr. Tansey out of office. So the problem is, we the voters would like more input during an election period. We like a choice. If that choice is, we have no choice with a town manager, but we have a choice with the first select person. And if that select person wants to professionalize the staff, write it in. Write it in. But a system like West Hartford, I mean, you had some good people there. But who's to say you're going to get that kind of government here? We need, as far as I'm concerned, we need a professional staff like Mrs. Glassman stated. She knew it was a problem. She knew we needed a new charter to put her ideas in place, which I think are in place right now. However, I'm totally opposed to a just town manager for the simple reason that I can't throw him out of office. I can't vote him out. I want to be able to vote people in, and I want to be able to vote people out. I want my vote to count for something. The funny part about this town is when the president is running for election, we have 75% turnout. The chances of your vote counting anything in a presidential election is close to zero. You're not even voting for him. You're voting for an elector. When we have a gubernatorial election, probably get about 50% turnout. Again, your vote counts, but proportionally not much. We vote for our elected officers, town officers, boards, about a 33% turnout. You really have some say in that. And we vote on the budget. Budget, that's where most of our money is spent. Turnout is 7%. Nobody votes. So why should we even be bothered when nobody's voting? Well, one of our previous state reps.
Excuse me 1 second. I'm going to ask you to try and pick it up a little.
Okay, 1 minute.
Thank you.
One of our previous state reps said to me when I complained, I said, gee, nobody votes. I feel so bad. And she said, Dr. Rinaldi, don't worry. It's good that uninformed people don't vote. So that means we only have 7% of the people in this town who are informed, who care. What kind of government are we going to get if only 70% of the people care? And there should be no Supreme Court type government for the Board of Education. We don't need change on the Board of Education for the sake of change, like some people want, term limits. We want change on the Board of Education because we want to have a choice on the people who sit there to represent what we want, a cost-effective form of education. The amount of money we spent is not proportional to the quality of the education we receive. Everybody knows that. If it was, the city of Hartford would have the best educational system in the world. But we have been in the past a very conservative town, very frugal. We spent our money very wisely. We were rated once A in section DRGA, number 5. Now we're in section B, and the reason we're in section B, I can go over that with you, but it's not necessary. But the reason is that we were once per pupil costs 129 out of 169 about 20 years ago. We're 88 out of 169 now. So we need change. And we can't do it with the charter. We can only do it with the Republicans and Democrats giving us a choice. We can't have people just going on the board and staying there forever and not representing us with quality of education, but it's cost effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rinaldi. Please. Can you repeat it for us, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. John Walker, 88 Blue Ridge Drive.
Okay, thank you.
So I printed everything out and then I left it on my desk. So you excuse me that I'm going to have to read this. So I sent you all a letter back in the beginning of your deliberations, and it's my first opportunity to actually be here live. So I just wanted to read a few sections because I know you've already worked on a few of my suggestions. But I do believe there was, I don't know if it was Dr. Rinaldi or somebody else made a comment about we have a bit of a crisis with regards to representation. And I think that there are certain inherent issues that I recognize this is not the Board of Ed and this isn't the Board of Finance, this is the Charter Revision Committee. So I'm going to stick to things that I think you can impact and not budgetary things and things like that. The representation issues, I think, are something that need to be very, can I get a phone call? I'm sorry. Go away. The representation issues are things that I think you need to consider in the political structure of our town. I think there is a disproportionate impact and influence between the Republicans and the Democrats, and we forget about the larger body of voters, which are the unaffiliates, and they're completely unrepresented in our town. Somebody had asked earlier about, there was this dialogue going on about the Board of Ed, and what I recognize around the issue that was being asked about in that dialogue is the fact that there are, whatever the number is, 50 members of the Democratic Town Committee and 50 members of the Republican Town Committee, and they decide essentially who the candidates are. They look for volunteers, which is greatly appreciated, because as it is hard to get people to volunteer, I appreciate that. But there's nobody in the middle looking for unaffiliated voters. And there aren't ballots typically unless people petition, which is a fairly onerous process, and there isn't all of the campaign money and muscle that goes behind unaffiliated voters. So I think we have this group of people that are unrepresented, and I think this group of people deserve representation, and I think there's this groundswell that is growing, this dissatisfaction that we see in our country and in our town about representation. So I wanted to read a few of the comments that I wrote to you in my memo of a few months ago with the issue around representation as kind of the common theme. So, number one, an appointment to serve on the Board of Education is currently a veritable life appointment. We've talked about that today as well as other meetings. Historically, the BOA members have been reappointed by the respective party, town committees, until the BOA member decides that they no longer want to serve on the BOE. In addition, the town political parties typically run on the ballot only the number of candidates up for re-election. So in essence, the election is merely a formality because the candidates are automatically elected and re-elected. As a result, the BOE is essentially a politically appointed board versus an elected board chosen by the people. Essentially, as I understand it, the only way that a person on the ballot for BOE could not get elected is if literally nobody votes on that person on the election, which is obviously, there's a zero probability of that ever happening. So I would...
John, can I interrupt you? Do you want to read this through your hard copy? Is
Oh,
it easier?
you're wonderful. Thank you.
Disregard Paul's comments.
Thank you, Paul.
Don't
Yes.
say anything bad about me.
I'm not going to say a single thing bad about you, but that's great. Thank you. Let me find my place here. So I would like to see the town charter require each town political party to nominate at least 2 extra candidates for each of the party's slate for Board of Ed. So there's actually a choice by party. I would also like to see a term limit for all BOE members to ensure that the BOE gets new and fresh perspectives on a regular basis, and such term limit should be on an offset schedule so that each election some Board of Education members are veterans and some others are new. I would leave it to you all to decide what that term limit should be. I recognize that you don't want it too short because it takes time to kind of get your sea legs, but not so long that the fresh perspectives are perhaps lost. I would also like to see unaffiliated candidates on the BOE ballot. I don't have the ratios, but I believe it's about 40% of the town are considered U's. So actually, given the ratios, there's more U's than there are R's and D's. So there's a huge group of people here I think would appreciate more representation. And given that they're the largest voting bloc, I'd like to see 2 unaffiliated people on the BOE as well. As I mentioned, so number 2 here, it is very troubling to me that the unaffiliated voters in town are not officially represented on our town boards and commissions. I recognize that, I believe on this board, there's a couple of U's. So I recognize that on some boards that is the case, but in general that is not the case. And I think that there should be U's on every appointed and elected board, regardless of whether you're elected or appointed. So I'd like to see that. Another thing that I'd like to see is this is number 4 on my memo. I'm going to skip over 3 because you've already addressed the planning and zoning issue. During the last charter revision, the Design Review Board was folded into the Zoning Commission's oversight. And as a result of that, some very long-standing experts on the Design Review Board decided to resign. And over the past few years, I believe, because I do watch land use pretty closely in town, I do believe that the critical eye and the deliberations of the Design Review Board have been reduced in quality, quantity, insightfulness, and proactivity. So again, I think the structure that we have with the Design Review Board embedded inside of zoning grants too much power to the Zoning Commission as an oversight board, and it makes the Zoning Commission like the boss of the Design Review Board. So I would like to see the Design Review Board restored as an independent advisory board to both planning and zoning. And I think that would be of great benefit to both the board and the town overall. Number 5 on my memo, I am strongly in favor of the creation of a professional town manager. I recognize that there are opportunities to create a variety of different structures in terms of the town, how the town manager reports to the Board of Selectmen. I also see value in having a first selectman who is perhaps in a role not as the manager of the town per se, but as a person who represents the town in various other ways, similar to the way you have, weak mayors and strong mayors in some towns. In particular, I think Hartford used to be like that. Maybe it still is. But Simsbury has become a very large and complex corporation, essentially, with a very large budget. And I can't imagine that there are very many close to $100 million corporations that have people who are essentially, novice or volunteer amateurs who get elected into the CEO role and then serve in that capacity. So by no means do I intend to diminish the contributions that the various first selectmen make, but I think they would also recognize that there's an awful big learning curve to become CEO of our town, and considering it potentially turns over every 2 years, I think it would be better to have a town manager. In response to one of the comments earlier, I think it was from Dr. Rinaldi around the accountability of the town manager, I think there's ways to provide incentive programs and contracts to people who are in professional roles, that if they do a good job, their contract gets renewed. If they don't do a good job, their contract doesn't get renewed. And if a person is compensated at an appropriate level for the risk of potentially losing their job, meaning they get paid a premium for that risk, then I think that works out well. And there's a number of people, whether they're on this board or people in our town, who get paid for doing a good job and are on contract type roles versus versus an employment at will type of a role. My last point, or 2 more points, is I would like to see the town charter. This is very important to me personally. I would like to see the Simsbury Town Charter modified to require every public meeting to have a dedicated public audience section of the agenda. There are very few opportunities in town for any citizen to stand up and speak. And for those who have been to Board of Selectmen meetings, you know that I often speak at Board of Selectmen meetings, but I speak about land use issues. And the number of times that Mrs. Hevner and Mrs. Glassman have said to me, Mr. Lucker, you recognize that we have no control over land use at this board. And I always say, I understand that, but there's no way for me to voice my point of view about land use to the land use boards because there is no public audience. So the only way I can get kind of on the record for the cameras and the microphone is to do it here and hope that somebody is listening. The other issue is that in most cases, the elected officials on those boards and commissions, because of their commitments in their own lives, don't have the opportunity to make themselves publicly available for comments and feedback from the voters outside of the board or commission's official meeting schedule. So in a representative government, feedback from the public is very important, and having a public audience every meeting not only ensures that the public has a chance to express its perspectives to the boards and commissions, but it also relieves the burden of those elected officials to have to be networking out into the public or being bothered at various potentially inconvenient times by people giving them the feedback. So it provides a formality that I think belongs in the town charter. The general rules of public audience currently in place for the Board of Selectmen, I think, serve as ground rules quite well. You get 5 minutes. You can, if you want to talk more, you go to the end of the queue at the end of the meeting. It typically allows people to speak their piece without overly dominating the public audience or being disruptive. Lastly, number 7 in my memo, I understand that it's likely that some changes to the town code may be required depending on the town code may be required depending on the ultimate changes made to the town charter. So as a result, I would like to make suggestions for potential changes to the town's code for the section on the ethics code. On April 13th, 2009, I gave a speech at the Board of Selectmen with suggestions for considerations to the Simsbury Code of Ethics, which is part of the town code. I do not believe that all my suggestions, in fact, I'm not sure any of my suggestions, made their way into changes to the ethics code. So I'm resubmitting my suggestions for changes to the Simsbury Ethics Codes, which I attached to this memo as Attachment A. So those are the things I wanted to kind of bring to your attention tonight, since I haven't had a chance to formally speak to my memo. So, and thank you, Mr. Arnold.
Thank you, Jeff.
John, thanks for the thoughtful comments. The issue of unaffiliates, we've heard that in broader than the board of it, kind of what you were laying out, having designated use on the boards. Can you just speak a little bit about how that would work? I mean it in this way. For better or worse, there's a mechanism for both parties to put up candidates with the use that there is no structure there, right? So how do you foresee that happening?
Well, it's a good question, because you're not going to create a U town committee. Or perhaps you do. I mean, that's a possibility, too. The disadvantage that we have in town is that the town committees, R's and D's, essentially control the political climate, and there is no primary. Like right now in the U.S., we're having a primary, and you've got this free-for-all going on in the D's and the R's, and ultimately the party will choose a candidate. We don't have the luxury of that in how the town committees are structured. So I think that's one thing to consider in terms of that. But as far as the use, I mean, it's a good question, and I don't usually like to bring up something without having the solution to offer. I'm sure that there's other towns that have approached this or settled this, and so maybe we could research that in other towns. But maybe it is as simple as having some type of self-governing structure among unaffiliates, and maybe we say that we have 50 slots for unaffiliated voters to serve in some kind of town committee structure, and maybe there's some oversight from the somebody's calling me, some type of oversight structure perhaps from the register of voters. I mean, I don't know.
Sure. No, thanks.
Food for thought. It's a good question, though.
I do believe, though, John, and maybe Tom can correct that, or on other boards and commissions, that there are a number of U's that have to be filled for the boards and commissions. I can't think of them off the top of my head.
There are a few.
There are several. So in answer to your question, on other boards and commissions, they will always have to fill it by a U within the town.
Yes. No, I agree. There are certain.
I can't think of the names
there are
off the top
certain
of my
that do.
head, but
Ethics is one.
Ethics has used.
there are several that
There's a few other.
Because when I was looking into doing something, I picked out a couple of boards and commissions that I could have gone on to without being a member of the party.
Right,
Yes.
and I will comment on one thing regarding the, and this gets back to what Dr. Rinaldi said, it's very hard actually to get people to volunteer. And oftentimes, and I can't speak for the Democrats, but I know from the Republican side, we will oftentimes reach out to yous and ask them if they would like to fill a spot.
But then they have to affiliate.
Oftentimes they do have to, register to an R, and then that's basically it. They've filled the spot, and then that's the last we hear from them or talk to them until it's time for a reappointment.
But then you get a zillion emails from Ted Cruz.
No.
Yes, you do.
This is nice.
Thank you.
Only if you sign up for Ted Cruz's email. There's no turning in your email.
I don't know how I got on all the lists, but I get them all.
You must have sent them money, John.
Probably right. You're probably right.
Thank you.
Not him. Okay,
All right,
thank
thanks, John.
Anybody else? Ma'am, you spoke already. Please.
So I
Any-
can't add to anything?
No, not right now. Thank you.
At the end of the
Anybody else
meeting.
who'd like to speak?
They allow that, yeah.
Anybody else like to speak at all? No. Okay, before we get started, Ed, did you want to make a
I'd like
motion?
to propose, we're already an hour into the meeting, and as we ended our last meeting, we talked about the issue, which is item number 5 here on our agenda, to talk about a straw poll for the form of government, I would propose we move that item up and address that, because I don't think we'll ever get through everything on our sheet tonight.
Anybody want to comment on that? Anybody in support of that?
I would say, sure.
That's it. We don't even need a formal motion, I just want to get a straw vote, as it were. Just a,
Is there a
Well-
motion?
no, there's not a motion, we're just.
Basically, usually, usually there is a motion to amend the
And the agenda, I know.
Well,
I know.
I'll-
I'm just
I'll
getting a
move
feel,
that
if it was only Ed, I wouldn't go through the motion.
All right,
So, okay, so you wanna make a motion?
I'll move that we amend the agenda to take item 5 and address that next.
I would second.
And we have a second from Tom. All those in favor, signify by
Aye.
raising hand. Hands? 1, 2, 3, 4. It's, okay, unanimous. So we're going to move that up. Now, straw poll, okay, I have, in all honesty, in all the years I ran meetings, I've never had a straw poll. So I went back to Roberts. We have to go, no, it's to do it right.
No. I
That's
was,
fine.
Okay?
I was thinking that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
why.
No, because we can't do it as a regular part of the committee, because then your vote actually has to count. So we need another motion, and let me just dig it up, I'll make the motion to make it easy. I move that the question be, this is really silly, I move that the question be considered informally. That's all it takes. If we get a second, then we get a vote, then we can discuss it and whatever, we can vote, take a straw poll, but it doesn't count towards a recommendation towards the committee as a whole. So do I have a second on that?
Second.
I assumed you would. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passed unanimously, so we now are into an informal session. Who wants to start it off?
Well, I'll just start off by saying that I had been supportive of doing a straw vote because I thought it could be, in a way, a learning experience and a mechanism to help us draw to our conclusion faster, rather than just sit here and listen to people talk to us and then one day automatically vote. And so I thought that if people expressed themselves ahead of time, we'd have some sense. And whether we want to do it publicly, which I have no problem with, or whether we want to do it confidentially, I mean, that's up to you folks. But I just think that it's beneficial to know, after, what have we had, a dozen meetings or something, how is the wind blowing here, and how do we get to closure on this issue, whatever it is.
I was thinking about, I think we've got, so far from all the conversations we've had, we've got 2 or 3 directions we can go. One is town manager, where the mayor, or in this case, the select person, takes a very secondary role, is more political role. The other is no town manager at all, and keep the current system. The other system we've heard proposed is keep the first selectman system, but formalize some of the town positions, whether it be HR, things like that, so that you end up with a professional group in terms of management positions within the town. And you formalize that, whether, I think Bob said you could either do it by the code or by the charter, but this way you end up with a professional group and they're hired professionally, as opposed to just political appointees who are just kind of pulled out. So I think, to my mind, we've had 3 options. I don't know if there's a fourth, if anybody's thought of a fourth.
No, I think those are the 3 that we've
Yeah, I think
basically
those are the
covered.
key 3 ones. Key 3.
So in terms of the straw vote, do you want to just mention each one and see what the support may or may not be? You want to discuss
I
them
just
again?
ask a question?
Just talk about it.
Yes, I'd like to have a little discussion first, because as you talk about that, the hybrid, if you will, I'd like to get clarity around better clarity around that definition about roles, because I think it's very important to distinguish in that model who really is the CEO. Because if you're asking the first selectman to be the CEO, that person then has the power, basically. And people have raised the issue about, well, it's an elected position, they're not necessarily professionally trained, they come to that position without any previous experience in running a town or what have you. Yet underneath, you've got all these professional people that are trained, are qualified and everything else. So I find that you kind of got to, why would I want to come in as a professional to work for someone who doesn't have any experience?
Bob, I think, wanted to address something.
Just to help your think about the three options. First, the third option, which is status, or maybe it was a second, I don't remember, but status quo, you understand that, obviously. Town manager really amounts to, the difference between the three options amounts to who appoints the directors and who generates the budget and who submits the budget to the legislative body and from there to the Board of Finance, and which body is the chief financial, the budget-making authority. Right now, it's the Board of Finance. Doesn't have to be that way, you know. So in terms of town manager, typically the town manager appoints all the directors. They work for the town manager at his or her pleasure, through contracts usually. Secondly, it's the town manager's budget that goes to the legislative body and from there to the budget-making authority. And the town manager works with a Scott Slifka type position, who is the chief elected officer, not the chief executive officer. The hybrid is a little bit different, and there's lots of models around the state, but essentially, if you wanted to do something less than eviscerating the current first selectman's full range of powers, you could have the first selectman appoint the professional staff and have the professional staff answer to the first selectman as they do today, but you could put those positions in the charter saying you shall have a chief administrative officer with these duties, you shall have a human services officer with these duties, and, you know, leave it up to you what happens with the budget and who the budget-making authority is. So the chief executive officer would remain the first selectman. The chief administrative officer would be a position that would be in the charter, and therefore not subject to what people refer to as a political appointment, meaning at the pleasure of the hiring and firing of the first selectman. So really, that's the distinction I see between a pure town manager form of government, where a town manager is both the chief executive and the chief administrative officer, and you have a chief elected officer. Whereas the hybrid, you split the chief administrative officer to a charter position. You leave the chief executive officer in the person of the first selectman, who's also the chief elected officer, but the first selectman appoints the chief administrative officer. The model I gave you is chief administrative officer, which is really different in name only from a town manager.
Right.
So just to help you frame your discussion and distinguish between the three models that you're...
Actually, when we heard several of these discussions, we had all sorts of variations on whether it was a chief administrator or a town, of who appointed the department heads. In some cases, it was split about which department heads were appointed.
Could do that too.
So it's, once you go to the hybrid model, it's hybrid. It's, it covers the whole gamut of opportunities.
Which many towns seem to have.
Yep.
What we've looked at.
Yep.
You know, it's not clear cut. And, you know, the thing that I continue to harp back to is, you know, who has the accountability? Who are they accountable to? What is the you know, should the voters have the accountability or the right to hold that person accountable for what the results are? By the same token, I think we do need to tighten up some of the things in the charter around the HR position and exactly how that's taken care of. And the other thing is, you know, we've had 3 town managers in here who have talked, and I've listened to them, and they know their stuff, but by the same token, I don't think it's a panacea either. You know, I look at some of those towns, they have their own issues. They really do. And I don't think any one of them is a better town, a better community, a better educational system than what Simsbury has. So those are the things I wrestle with and say, you know, okay, how can we modify this? By the same token, if we mess up, there's going to be another charter revision commission in 5 years. Okay? And the people can, and then you'll hear an outcry to say, look, you really got to fix this thing. You know, something's gone dramatically wrong. So that's where I am on the whole thing. So I'm sort of leaning towards, you know, 3, which is okay, keep the first selectman, but let's tighten up some of those positions, and how would we do that? And, maybe it would be something where, we would get further feedback from the town staff, say, here's what I think, if you're going to go in that direction, here's what I think you should do. And formalize, the director's position of administration and make it a charter position. And maybe it's not at the total whim of the first selectman, but with consultation with the board of selectmen.
Right.
That type of thing.
I'm glad you clarified, because I know this was a question too. When you talk in terms of budget, whose budget really is the budget? I mean, we at times we sit here and we think even on Board of Ed, is it Board of Ed budget, superintendent's budget? But I'm glad you clarified, for at least for me, that if you're looking at town manager position, it is the town manager budget that is presented to the legislative body. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, the issue is whether the legislative body is also the chief financial, the final approver of the budget. Here, that is split. The legislative body proposes the Board of Selectmen's budget to the Board of Finance, and the Board of Finance is the chief fiscal authority of the town. It's the Board of Finance budget that goes to referendum, not the Board of Selectmen budget. And the Board of Ed, the Board of Finance's role with the Board of Ed is simply to approve a line item within the budget, and the Board of Ed has complete discretion within state statute guidelines as to what to do with that line item. The Board of Finance cannot change line items with the Board of Ed budget. They can simply approve an appropriation.
Right, but what you can tackle the budget as a whole, but once it's approved by referendum, the Board of Ed has the right to move things around, whereas the Board of Selectmen doesn't.
Yeah, the phrase in Connecticut is once the budget goes over the transom to the Board of Ed, it can't be touched again during the fiscal year.
Right.
But the point I'm making is here, the budget proposal from the Board of Selectmen is sent to the Board of Finance as the chief fiscal authority. In lots of towns, that role is switched, where the Board of Finance recommends to the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen is the final budget-making authority. That's really up to how you define it in the charter. But the town manager typically, the town manager generates the budget in the same way that the Board of Selectmen, the first Selectman generates the budget here. It still has to be approved by a secondary elected body.
Which gives you that checks and balance.
The checks and balance. And the whole issue of referendum is also open as well. Nothing in state law says you have to go to referendum. That's a matter of local charter for the budget. But all of these nuances have an impact into the powers of what you're really talking about is a chief administrative officer / chief executive officer.
But in your hybrid vote, that elected official still comes in with no training, no experience. Okay? And is the chief executive. And what I'm struggling with is, if I'm a professionally trained, knowledgeable person, been experienced, and I'm coming in, I take direction from someone who has no experience or limited experience, and I would struggle in that environment. And to add to that complexity, that person could change every 2 years. So as I think about trying to hire good quality people to fill those professional ranks, if I'm coming into a situation where I know it's a town manager and there's a level of stability there, like we've seen with all the town managers who've been in front of us, I'm much more comfortable in that role as opposed to coming in saying, hey, I have to take direction from someone who doesn't know as much as I do, isn't as experienced as I am. And by the way, that person could change in 2 years, 3 years, whatever, take on the term limits. That presents a level of instability to me that I think is not conducive to what we want to do from a long-term perspective for the town.
But again, in the hybrid model, we heard that people gave, whether we called them a town manager, we called them the chief administrative, whatever, we give them a name. There was variations on what they had in their hiring authority. They were hiring all the department heads in some cases. In some cases, There were a few that left, like the finance was left, or the police chief was left for the Board of Selectmen. But in other cases, they had full authority, maybe subject to final approval by that, but they were using their professional as the one to handle the professional hiring for those positions. So I think we could structure it any way we want to, really, in the end.
And I would think, and I'm assuming they do the same thing in Simsbury with the Board of Education as example. They actually end up hiring a new superintendent.
The Board of Education.
You hired, that's your only employee.
That is our only employee.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So the Board of Education, who are not the professionals, go out and can get and do a job search, with national search in a lot of cases, and hire a superintendent who is very professional and then runs that part of the business. But the Board of Ed, the elected officials, are still really the ones in charge.
Right.
Yeah.
And those are unpaid positions.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas you hire.
But would you work for a Board of Ed that's not as experienced as you? And obviously, they do it all the time. And I've seen certain towns that very successfully run by the Board of Selectmen, where they've had long-term retention of all the key department heads, police, fire, public works, et cetera, on down the line, because they know they're in an environment where they're treated as professionals, where their ideas and policies are treated as such, not at the whim of some, as you would say, inexperienced person, but a town that is very serious about their hiring. They have a good HR person, and any of the key positions have to end up being hired not just through the first selectman, but through the entire board has to sign off. So, and they stay there for a long, long time. They're there 15, 20 years.
So in that model, who's the CEO?
The first selectman. That's the ultimate CEO.
That's the problem I got.
Well, it's, from your perspective.
My opinion.
My perspective, I've always felt that as a member of a town, as a resident of a town, I want the top ultimate person to be responsible to me and my vote, as opposed to somebody else. And that's, just kind of my feeling.
And what we talked about is that's the chairman of the board, if you will. And they set the policy, and they set directions, and that's the person who's the elected official that the people can call, talk to, express their concerns. Ultimately, the town manager, or chief administrative officer, if you will, is responsible for the management of the town from a professional perspective, make sure things are done in an efficient and effective manner, and they bring that level of skill to the table. By the way, you're not paying for that CEO, for that board, chairman of the board. You are paying for the town manager. So if you look to be the CEO now with the first selectman, that's a salary that you got to pay, and then you got to turn around and hire all these other professional people. That's additional.
I would think you already have all these other hired professionals. You already have department heads. You already should have, and this is one of the things.
No, but you have if your CEO is the first selectman, that's a paid position.
Right, exactly.
And you're turning around and you're hiring professional people to come in and do work. Those are other
No, but
salaries.
you're going to hire, anybody is going to hire those professional people. You're going to hire a professional police chief and fire chief and public works director and all that.
Who's ever there to manage the town.
Right. Okay, we're talking parallel here. Okay, I understand that.
But I think that to get good quality people, you got to hire professional people. You got to let them do their job. Let them come in and do what they're paid to do. If they've got to report now to a CEO who's not as experienced as them, I just see that would be an extremely frustrating position to be in.
I've seen it in real time and has not witnessed that problem, actually. But that's my experience. One thing
Which is why we're having this discussion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's why we're throwing it out there.
One thing, I'm going to read this in as long as it's informal, because I did get an email from Melissa, who wasn't able to attend today. And she just said, wanted to let you know my position. Currently, the solution I would like to see is the retention of the first selectman paid with a codification in the charter of the positions that our administrators currently hold, which is, at the moment, at least, she would seem to be in favor of the hybrid situation, which we've discussed.
Excuse me, whose was that?
This was Melissa. Yeah, I haven't heard anything. I didn't know Mary or Anita weren't going to be here tonight, and they didn't send anything along that.
They had the agenda, right?
Yeah.
I think
I'm
Anita
sorry,
had
go
said she wasn't going to be here.
Yeah, I couldn't remember.
I think the Board of Ed superintendent model is kind of interesting to look at, because I don't think anybody on the Board of Ed would just say, well, I'm the chairman, so I'll be the superintendent. But that's what we have, but you know the value of hiring a superintendent. What we have on the town side, we have that exact thing, is that, I'm going to be the first selectman, so I'm going to run the town. And that's a real disconnect for me. And we've had great people running the town, and we've been fortunate, but I'm leaning towards a town manager because not only do I care about the town today, but I really look at where we might be 10 years from now. And I found an old article from the Hartford Courant in 1997. Town manager or first selectman, Simsbury panel to explore options. We've been exploring this option for 20 years. And the conclusion back then on why they were exploring it was because the town was getting too big. In 1997, it was getting too big. Well, we're big enough now where I think we deserve a professional town manager. It will free up the Board of Selectmen and the first select person to set policy, to be interacting with the community. But I think it gives us the best opportunity, not only to run the town good today, but also to run it good so that we're set for 10 years from now. And I hear Dr. Rinaldi about, I want my vote to count, and it will, because if the Board of Selectmen hire a bad town manager, he or she's gonna lose their job, and they're gonna be voted out of office. So I don't really see a problem with the vote not counting, because it very much will. Because a town manager's gonna have to produce here, and he or she's gonna be watched. But that's kind of where I'm thinking on this issue. I was very impressed with West Hartford and Mansfield, and love the town. Love living here. Think it's really run well. But do I think we could do a little more? Yes. Do I think we're going to have to do a lot more 10 years from now? Absolutely. And who better is going to be positioned to do that? Not sure somebody who's elected every 2 years. I'm not sure. Town manager, get the right person. I think we're on our way to great things. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm kind of a fan of if it ain't broke, don't fix it either. And I don't think it's broke, but I think we could be depriving the town of the ability to take better strides and bigger strides in the future. So that's kind of where I'm leaning.
I'll throw it out there. Paul, really, we could have written the same talking points, quite frankly. I am probably right in that hybrid model. I think you're absolutely right. A town manager doesn't solve all ills. I mean, all these towns have have their own set of issues. Should we codify the positions? Absolutely. And I think we're wrestling with all these details about who gets to hire and who. I think that's up to us. We can make that work however we see fit. It may be a help to even have a little org chart to help us sort of visualize it. I think when it comes to that point, but that's where I'm leading right now. I have not heard enough to convince me that we need a wholesale change in our government to solve these issues before us. Do we all want a professional government? Absolutely. Do we want more efficiencies? Absolutely. But I think you can achieve those inside the current framework with obviously some tweaks, as Paul's elaborated on.
I would just say human nature is fairly predictable. I left 2 large law firms in Hartford for the same reason. Couldn't stand the partner that I was under. Couldn't take it because I felt I was doing all the work and not getting the credit. And I knew the job or knew the issue better than the guy that I was reporting to. So I left, just like lots of people have left this town. Paul Featherton, I read this article about that Anita in 2001 said he was my right-hand man, but he went to Newington to take the assistant town manager job because that full town manager job was going to open up a year later, and then he got that job, and now I think he's a city manager out in the Midwest somewhere.
Colorado. He is the city manager.
Right, so, I mean, he could have been here.
But that sort of proves, I'm sorry, were you done? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
That sort of proves that, we have had quality people. Brandon, okay? Quality person, all right? But again, he wasn't going to stay. because he wanted to go to the next level, all right? Paul was the same way.
But wasn't the next level town manager, not a staff person in the town?
I think it would have been a bigger town, okay? I mean, I worked with Paul, I worked with Brandon, okay? By the same token, you left 2 law firms, okay, which proves the point that if you don't like something, there's no prison employment, right? You can go somewhere else. And it is a tough issue. By the way, that article I read that article, okay? And there was also someone in there who said, yeah, we need professional management. By the same token, we've got to let the voters have a say in this, okay?
And they do, right? I mean, this is ultimately going to be a referendum.
I also think the population of the town was probably around the same it is right now.
Money,
So
though.
We've
The
been
money's
at
a lot different.
23,000 for as long as I can remember, But
I mean,
there
the
are
article
good
said that
points.
we were the last, I think we were the 24th largest town, and the 23 ahead of us had town managers. That's what they said. So
We're on the leading edge.
Let's not fall off it, though.
The other question I asked you were 2 law firms.
Now I work for myself, then that's not a fair question.
You work for 2 law firms.
How do you like the boss?
It's a terrible guy.
Higher ups who I assume were professional people.
I hope they're not
Who
listening.
knew their stuff, right? But you still weren't happy and you left. So there's no guarantee that
we've talked
I'm just saying, there's no guarantee that if you're the fire chief, you're going to want to work for this town manager in a year or 2 anyway. So I'm just saying that kind of diffuses that a little.
But if you incentivize, I mean, if somebody is hired as a town manager of Simsbury, they're coming here because they see not only the current situation, but the potential to grow professionally and to hit a home run here. And so, most of these town managers hang around if they have a good relationship and it's a true town manager council. The thought of the hybrid is a disconnect for me because I don't think you're going to get the best person available. And as soon as you get somebody here who you groom for a couple of years and a town manager job opens up, he or she is going to fly the coop. And we're going to be on this revolving. Meanwhile, are we missing opportunities to grow the town? And that's my concern is things are going well now. I do think we need to be more big picture, which is I think what the Board of Selectmen would do and the first select person would do if they're not tied up with the administrative stuff that frankly most of them are not qualified to do anyway. So.
But I think that's what we're talking about in a hybrid, though. That's part of it, right? That
But
would
they're
go
still going to
over
report
the-
to somebody that doesn't know their job.
That's
But then
fundamental
isn't that
disconnect.
upon the
Town
voters?
manager, they
Isn't that upon the voters to hire somebody who is qualified?
Well, we only recommend to the Board of Selectmen. So no matter what we recommend, if the Board of Selectmen doesn't like our recommendation, nothing happens. Then if they like our recommendation, it has to go to the voters anyway. And they can ultimately have the decision on whether it's going to be a town manager or not. But we've been kicking this tire to the point where it's got 28 patches in it. And there's a reason why we've been kicking it, because everybody has that thought in the back of their mind that, why aren't we doing this? Are we? Doesn't the position justify a professional? The answer to me is unquestionably yes.
I agree with what Tom has said. I'm not going to repeat them all because I agree with everything you said. But also, in addition to that, I mean, I mentioned once before that in Wallicott's book, he talks about the non-binding referendum we had in town 25 years ago. And it was almost a dead heat. I mean, out of 6,000 votes, it was less than 100 votes differential, as I recall. That's 25 years ago, and how much more sophisticated has the world become since then? So, and there's no organization that can't be improved. So, looking to the future, I would hope we could come up with something constructive, and I guess that's the argument against maintaining the status quo.
I mean, our elected Board of Selectmen sent this issue to us. If they wanted to keep the first selectman in place as is, we wouldn't be sitting here. So I think we've got some sense of what the voters want, and the Board of Selectmen has some sense of what the voters want.
I'm not so sure I agree with that. I mean, this issue, as you've elaborated, has been up for many years. I don't think you can take the cue, or what the cue of the board, or what they're thought of on this issue because they told us to to look at it. They also asked us to look at all kinds of boards and commissions, and I don't think you can read into how they feel about those.
I do, because the last Charter Revision Commission was 2 years ago. So, and we're back. We're back.
And I think the issue that was presented, as Mary articulated, that right now we have people like Tom Cook and Sean in place that the charter doesn't necessarily call for, right? And so we have to do something.
No, absolutely. I'm not suggesting we don't do anything.
That's what 3 is,
Which
is
which-
codifying
so-
what it is in there.
I haven't heard anybody say that we should keep it as is. It's just a
So-
question
so
of
it's-
what changes are we
So
going to recommend.
if we are going to make the change, but there's a couple, I mean, I do think retention is a huge issue. You got good people here like Tom and
That's
Sean,
great.
but right now they report to someone that, quite frankly, they know Lisa's a wonderful person, she's very bright, she's very capable, no question, but she's not experienced like these folks. So I would be questioning in my own mind, I don't put words in your mouth or anything, but how much longer these guys will stick around? These are professional folks, they're good. And if they're reporting to the boss who doesn't have the experience they got, that's a tough position. So if you're thinking long-term, and we're going to make a change anyways, why not go to a situation where we bring professional people in to help us manage the town more efficiently, more effectively, and allow the policymakers to go out and do the visionary things, do the big thinking things, do the things they got to do, free them up of all of the day-to-day stuff that they got to do, and get this thing headed in the right direction longer term. I think if you think about the future and where we want to be, I think having a town manager in place gives us the best opportunity to get there.
So one question would be, are we talking semantics? You know, is it really something different than a hybrid than have town manager? So the question under the hybrid would be, do we have a paid first selectman? That may be the bigger issue. And how much authority do we give the hybrid, whatever we call them, town manager or, administrative?
Chief administrative officer, which is one municipality used that, so
Yeah,
again.
but I mean, whatever title we gave them, it really gets down to what's going to frame that definition of what their role is. And then, of course, what that role is with the Board of Selectmen. So even your model may be hybrid in some cases versus that. So we need to figure out where are we talking here in the things. We know we got to codify something because, as I said, it goes back to the basis. It's how far are we going to go in that definition of what we're given for the professional, whatever we call them. So.
But I think also dovetailing on that, when you're looking at this, I think for me still, for the town manager, again, that as is in Mansfield, as in West Hartford, they are not paid. The mayor of Mansfield, the first select person in Mansfield, and the mayor in West Hartford are not paid positions. The town manager and the CAO of Mansfield are the paid positions. So what are we looking for in terms of if Simsbury, should we go that route? And I think the same with the hybrid situation. You have that hybrid right in Canton, which has evolved and worked well for Canton. So it is a stipend for Canton for that first select person position, but that CAO is that paid position. So there's a couple, areas that we could go down.
So let me go back to, in your thinking of hybrid, what were you thinking of relative to that?
To the salary of the first
whether it's salaried versus the.
Well, I think we need to talk about that. I mean, not sure I have a answer for you right now, but I think it's absolutely a critical issue for no other reason, and not trying to go back to an issue that we all want to put behind us. But we had a first selectman who had her salary slashed midterm, and I think if you put this in code, however, I've got no preconceived notions on the answer, but these people plan, they got a budget, they got kids, they got mortgages. If you can provide, I think if we can provide them some certainty, I think that would be beneficial to whoever is in that seat. I'm not sure I answered your question.
Which seat? First selectman?
Yeah.
So that says we'd have a paid first selectman in the hybrid model that you were thinking of.
Yeah, again, we can talk about what is it, 5,000, 100,000, whatever it is, but I think these people are given their time, and they are the face of the town. Yeah, I think we should give them some
On the hybrid model. That's what
Yes.
you're talking about.
Yeah.
And in the hybrid model, from Tom's model, what authority would not the professional have? We would kind of define that the town manager would say he does all the hiring, and they report to him. Hiring, were you looking at, and the hybrid would there be certain positions that wouldn't be under them, or they're still reporting to the board? Or that's something we got to figure out.
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe I'm just saying, we may be just how we're talking about it, and may be the same thing, and because we haven't got down to that detail to frame.
Devil's always in the detail.
Yeah, it really is a lot of detail here we're going to put down.
Well, it sounds like we already voted on maintaining the status quo. I don't think anybody wants to maintain the status quo here, do they?
Yeah, well, that one thing is,
So that's one off the table.
and it's just now down to, I think, definitional.
What form?
Things. So we may need to structure to that detail on what, from a pure to a hybrid, what are we thinking of, any differences before we can go forward? So.
Well, I think that needs to be really codified before we even go any further than that. I mean, I think when you're looking in terms, I'm just knowing in Canton, in terms of that hybrid, that was so stipulated from before. When she ran, she knew that. And she, I think, increased the hours, 4 hours of, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It was 2 days. Now that was part of her platform, to increase part of that hybrid model. No increase in stipulated compensation. It was just the term, because she felt that she would best serve the community by adding in that third day with those hours in that. So I think that's something that when you're looking at this, if we look at a type of hybrid model, that has to all come into play. It just needs to be tightened a little bit more, or it needs to be tightened very much so.
Canton, that was an unpaid position. The first selectman was an unpaid position.
She gets I think $5,000 stipend. They call it that's a stipend.
But basically, the town is run by the chief administrative officer.
Yes, who is the full-time.
And I came away from that conversation saying, you can call him a chief administrative officer.
You can call him town manager.
But at the end of the day, he's a town manager.
Right,
He's doing
whatever you want to call that.
Quacks like a duck. It's what it is. So I didn't view that as a hybrid. I kind of view Canton as they just name it differently.
Right, because it's unpaid.
Yeah.
What,
Ken,
she is given a stipend.
Oh, you're talking about...
I'm talking Canton, the first select person is given a stipend.
Stipend, I think that's $5,000 stipend or
Right,
something like that.
she is given a stipend, so that is one form of a hybrid. I mean, the hybrid can come in many different shapes and sizes, stipends, salary, what have you, but that's something that, and the hybrid model, it will vary from municipality to municipality, so. But again, going back to the town manager position, I mean, we know how the town manager position and the mayor is run very clearly, very succinctly, that we heard from in West Hartford. And in Mansfield, is he compensated, the first select person, or not?
No.
Okay. All right, so that's the two districts, so the two municipalities that we heard
Greenwich.
from there. In Greenwich,
He is. The
Yes,
first
he
selectman
is.
is compensated very well, as is the town manager.
right.
So you've got all kinds, I don't know, I keep going back to the Erdman study, which had 3 options, and this was a study that the first selectman authorized, okay? That part of it was to address the issue of personnel, which Anita, continues to talk about as far as one of her concerns was personnel. And there were 3 options here. I know Tom and I have talked about this, and it'd be interesting to get feedback further. But, one of the options was no delegation of final personnel decisions. Basically, it's maintain status quo, which none of us, I think, have talked about. The second is partial delegation of final personnel decisions, provided for in charter where the first selectman, which is basically how Mary did it, she would provide for some delegation. maybe not all, but some, okay? Day-to-day functions are delegated, provides for further professionalism. This is the advantages. It's talking about the advantages. First selectman typically not a trained professional, somewhat shortens decision-making process, potential to retain professional staff. First selectman receives a recommendation and makes final decisions. Disadvantages, somewhat lessens the responsibilities of the first selectman. Okay? Option number 1, which was full delegation of final personnel decisions. Advantages, provided for in charter, which I think we'd have to make some charter changes. Day-to-day functions are delegated. Provides further professionalization. First selectman not required to be a trained professional or have human resources experience. Shortens decision-making process and timeline. Potential to retain professional staff. Disadvantages, lessens responsibilities of the first selectman. Okay? And again, I've suggested to everybody that you read this study, okay? Option 1, and it goes into it further. Full delegation of personnel function to professional staff would be a very important step forward to the town of Simsbury. Full delegation, I don't know why I'm having a hard time with that word today. Too much coffee, I guess. Would effectively mean that authority currently vested in the first selectman for hiring, firing, conducting performance appraisals, and determining raises and discipline would be formally delegated to the director and deputy director of administrative services, sitting right over there. The first selectman would continue to have oversight and provide policy guidance in these areas, but would no longer have final decision-making authority in these areas. As required by the charter, the first selectman would continue to function as the chief operating officer responsible for the direction of the business of the town. All departments, town department heads, including the director of administrative services, would continue to report to the first selectman. As the chief operating officer, the first selectman would prepare the annual performance review of the director of administrative services. The Director of Administrative Services would perform the role of Personnel Director at the pleasure of the First Selectman and the Board of Selectmen. So,
This is personnel related.
this is personnel related, okay? Which was one of the major issues that came up with respect to the charter.
Right, but
Okay.
the functions of a town manager are much, much broader than just
They
personnel.
are, okay? But this is, if you were going to go into a hybrid, okay, I think that would be one of the options where you would have that. And again, I understand what you're saying with respect to a person coming in who doesn't have, any experience in it. Well, it's kind of up to the voters. If they want to hire a boob, go ahead, okay? But at least you still have some of the professional staff here. And if they want to walk, then they walk. And the voters can point to that first selectman and say, what the heck did you do? And they're gone in 2 years. Now, I know it doesn't match the business model. But believe me, I live in that world too, all right? But I'm just saying, this is a study which was paid for and authorized by the Board of Selectmen and the first selectman. And I think it's worth exploring it to say, is that a way we would go? That's just my opinion. I mean, you guys can disagree. That's fine.
My only point is that this study was to address the specific issue of personnel.
Correct.
And what we're talking about is much broader than that.
Correct.
So
I don't disagree. But where I'm saying is, if you're going to go to a hybrid model, okay, you got something right here in front of you that you can look at and say, what's wrong with this? Why don't we look at this? It still allows for a paid first selectman, okay, which actually in the budget that the first selectman was proposing actually had that reduced salary. It was a question of timing that got everything all, in a Twitter. But, so, anyway, it's my thought on it.
Well, in answer to that, if you're looking at in the hybrid, again, maybe I just can't have to wrap my head around it. What is the percentage of the salary reduction of the first select person?
That was already in there. It was
It was
and
already-
it's what was currently proposed by
Okay.
by Lisa, which I think is 75,000.
Okay, all right, so maybe I. Understand that, okay.
So where are we, Mr. Chairman?
Where are we? We want a straw vote, so we have two options on the table. Okay. One is the hybrid and a very generalized hybrid form at the moment, and one is going to a strict town manager. So just as a purely straw vote, as a pure recommendation, or not even a recommendation to the body, all those who would be in favor at the moment of a hybrid form in one way or another, raise their hands. We have 4. All those who want to go to a strict town manager form, raise your hands. All those who want to abstain.
I want to abstain.
Okay, which is fine.
And what about, how do we count?
Well, it's not a formal vote, so we all
That's
know
fine.
where
That's fine.
Melissa wants to go.
Okay.
So at the moment, the indication is we would probably lean more towards a hybrid than a pure town manager one. Okay, now we can go back to...
One last comment.
Well, sure.
Whichever direction we take is going to require a lot more detail.
Well, that's what we got the next meeting for. Bob, you want to say something?
Yeah, would you like us to draft up a version of the hybrid that you could look at?
That would be great. That would be very helpful.
Would you do it?
And if you can get it to us, like maybe sometime by the middle of next week, so we have a week to digest it, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, that should be doable.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, we are back to the original agenda. We are now review of information and possible action on inclusion of constables in the charter.
We didn't do the minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, you're right. Okay, anybody have any corrections or comments? Well, first, let's see if there are any corrections or...
I have a comment.
Yeah.
Okay, and on page 2 of 5, under Dr. Rinaldi's comments, and now, I can't change this because it's what he said, okay? But the interpretation was different. With all due respect, Doctor, it reads, he said, Commissioner Rinaldi said that if the Board of Ed is truly elected, then it will ruin the school system, okay? I don't recall saying that. And again, I'm not going to change the minutes because that's what he said, that's what he heard, probably, but I just wanted for the record that I don't believe that's what I said.
Any corrections at all to the minutes?
Irene, I think Dr. Rinaldi is R-I-N. R-I-N, right?
Correct.
That was my only change.
Okay, anything else? Anybody? Can get a motion to approve?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of,
Second.
review of the minutes for the regular meeting of February 4th, 2016.
Paul,
I'm sorry, for you, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous, thank you. Okay, now we go to review of information and possible action on inclusion of constables in the charter. We had asked the chief to come, he was unavailable.
That's correct, he had to go to a wake this evening, but you do have a memorandum.
Right, he did send out a memorandum to us, I'm trusting hopefully you all have read it. Does anybody?
You also have, from the last thing, the reason why it wasn't put in.
Excuse me?
This part. Is there a procedure for appointment of constables? That's covered in the May 2012 memo. And basically it said, doesn't need to be in the charter, because you've got, you have other means between the Board of Selectmen can do that if they ever wanted it, so that implies, that's why it went out of the charter, because they didn't need to be in the charter.
Okay. We just lost Paul. Does anybody else have any comments on whether this should be brought back into the charter?
Just given the time that Mr. Kalishman has spent in front of us talking about this particular issue, I think it would be appropriate just to make sure he's aware of this memorandum and has a chance to review it himself. Just
Well, he needs to be aware also, because one of the things that came up is that they didn't know why before, and that's what this is covering, so.
So we want to get a copy to him and then bring it up again. Well, I don't want to bring it up at the next meeting. because I
If
want
we
to
feel
do
we have enough
town
information.
I would
if we have enough information to vote on this.
Yeah, I
think we have
don't
enough
see how I
information to
would
vote.
ever disagree with our chief of police, wrote to us, and now, I'm a history major and I'm a history buff, but, so I'm enamored with the whole concept of it, but, it's not for the modern town of
Right.
Simsbury, so.
It's kind of my gut feeling on
Yeah,
it.
so I would move that,
Well, I think both reasons. It doesn't need to be in the charter, which is why it was removed, plus they're saying they don't have a current need for it.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Bob, does it not need to be in the charter? Just to clarify. You have a lawyer here, you might as well use him.
I think you have a copy of the letter I prepared in 2012. And at that time, I mean, the statute is clear. It says that the constables may be appointed by ordinance. 7-185 says, unless otherwise provided by special act or charter, all town officers shall be appointed as provided. I'm looking for specifically where it talks about the constables, but I believe my memo said then that constables don't need to be in the charter and could be created by ordinance.
Yeah, that's the way I interpreted what you're saying.
And if you chose to, you could pass a motion suggesting that the Board of Selectmen consider an ordinance or not, but it does not have to, you are not obligated to add it back to the charter.
Right.
But,
I believe you all have Bob's letter from 2012.
yeah.
Yes, that's what we're,
So this was brought up for the 2012 charter revision? Is that what this main
Yes.
letter was for?
That's correct. And I recall the chief had a similar opinion in 2012 as well.
Because Mr. Kauschman said that there was no discussion around the constables, or at least that he could find. Okay.
well, when he brought it up, when we had the two previous chairs, they didn't remember, so I guess it wasn't in what he could find. But, this looks like they had
Some discussion.
and reason why they did it.
I'm kind of in agreement with Tom. It seems like something that, it's a nice, antiquated thing that was maybe necessary in 17 or 1800s. I don't know that we necessarily need it in 2000. Certainly not as a requirement in the charter.
Not with 38 sworn officers.
we got enough judicial marshals in
And
Simsbury.
a statewide task force if we needed help.
Yeah.
And as importantly, if a need did arise, you would not have to impanel a Charter Revision Commission to recreate the office. You could do it by ordinance, by action of the Board of Selectmen.
Correct.
Okay, does anybody want to make a recommendation or a motion, I should say, to suggest this to the Board of Selectmen as a charter issue, or no?
No.
Okay, so,
I'd make a recommendation we don't.
I second.
if we, I think it speaks to itself that way, yeah, okay. So we are just going to put that as a no, okay. Further discussion and possible action on boards and commissions currently in charter and alternative of creation of boards and commissions by ordinance. And there is a list of, I believe it is 14.
That's Bob's letter, which has the lists, made copies for you also.
There we go.
You turn the heat off in here?
There are a number of them that are required by statute, as Bob
Yes.
is indicating as well.
Didn't we go through?
Okay, so there are a number that are required by statute. We'll go through them one by one, and if it's not required, then we'll see if anybody wants to make any suggestions as to whether or not we should eliminate that board or commission for some reason. So first is Culture, Parks, and Rec. It is not required. Does anybody want to discuss the possibility of eliminating that board or commission? Or that commission, I should say.
Refresh my memory, didn't we have discussion around
We had
this?
discussion
and
last-
Splitting
Both
out
committees.
culture?
Yeah, that was last,
and
if you look at
making
the
it just-
minutes as we talked, that's what
Right, just making it
Anita brought up,
park
yeah.
and- Park and rec,
Parks and
right?
Rec. Well, that's what I'm saying, so if somebody wants to make a suggestion as to that.
She wanted to split off
She wanted
culture.
to split off culture from it.
Does anybody formally want to make that motion?
I'll make the motion that, let me think about this, how we make this motion. Per previous discussion of last meeting, eliminate the Culture, Parks, and Recreation Commission to inclusively be Parks and Recreation Commission. Is that making sense or not, per our last discussion? I mean, we were talking before about the term culture could be created by a culture commission. Arts Commission could be created by ordinance for Board of Selectmen.
Or it could be folded into some other,
Right.
either board or something that,
In the minutes, it said you to have members of them speak before the commission on this particular issue.
Oh, my gosh. I recall that.
Give him a call.
It's early.
tell them the pizzas are being delivered at 9 o'clock.
Skype him in.
Why don't we hold off on this
Okay.
one,
And then,
and we'll make arrangements to bring somebody over, Tom? Okay.
And I think also to have Anita
Yeah, she's the one that brought
be
it
here to
originally.
talk about it.
Yeah, sure.
I don't disagree with what she had to say. I think it's good, but we should give the commission an opportunity to talk about it.
Sure. Next one, Conservation Commission, Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Agency, that is required by statute, so let's leave that alone. Housing Authority is required. Aging and Disability Commission is not required.
I think the consensus was that they do a pretty good job and they're pretty,
Yeah, that's what was.
Pretty
yeah, pretty active,
Keep
and
that one going.
and they,
we should just leave it.
Yeah, so unless anybody wants, and the way we're going to handle this, unless somebody wants to move to eliminate or change a commission, we don't need to vote. Okay, if there's no discussion, then it's a no. So aging and disability, we'll keep as is. Human Relations Commission?
We already voted.
Already voted on it.
That, that's
Yeah.
checked, okay. Economic Development, this is something that I know Anita wanted to discuss,
Well,
Right.
right?
Melissa brought it up.
I think also, Anita had some interest in this one.
Yeah, both.
So let's skip on that for now.
Yeah, we should talk about that. I mean, that is an issue that if we do move forward to have more personnel issues handled by the Director of Administrative Services, that perhaps the first selectman, those duties would be better, and then if the board wants to create something by ordinance, they can do it, and therefore the Economic Development Commission can be, replaced, modified, created by ordinance, whatever.
Yeah.
One of the ways you could accomplish that is when you propose a charter and you want to change a commission from a charter commission to ordinance, it doesn't have to disappear the day the charter is enacted. You could sunset it a year following so you give the Board of Selectmen a year to reconstitute it as through ordinance, and then there's no break in service, so to speak. So you could say, as of X date, the Economic Development Commission shall expire,
Right.
disappear in the charter, and then
Okay.
that gives the board time to reconstitute it through ordinance.
Good point.
Okay, so we'll hold off on discussion of that. The Historic District Commission, that's required. WPCA, that is required. The Public Order Commission is required. Public Code Board of Appeals, required. Then the Board of Ethics, I think we said, did we voted on that already?
no.
I don't have a yes down.
Yes, I have Bob's suggestion was to keep it in the charter.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's one, if you create it by ordinance, you open up the opportunity for mischief, because some Board of Selectmen way in the future could get an adverse opinion they didn't like and
Right.
undo it
Toss
through ordinance, and that one makes sense to be in the charter because it's immune from tampering with through changes in the ordinance.
Okay. So unless anybody has any suggestions, we'll leave that as is.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, Police Commission, would that kind of fall into the same idea, you think? I don't know how that works, frankly.
Well, the Police Commission meets monthly and meets with the chief, and the chief reports to the Police Commission and the first selectman almost simultaneously. They have some duties under collective bargaining, could be reconstituted by ordinance, but I don't see a compelling need to do that. This may be, this is closer to Board of Ethics because, the roof isn't leaking, but someday it could, and you wouldn't want tampering with the duties and functions and authority of the Police Commission down in the future through amendment of an ordinance.
I move to keep it.
Okay, so we'll keep that. Open Space Committee?
That's a tough one.
Very.
I don't know how often they actually meet.
They meet on,
Or Bob, I'm sorry.
They meet fairly regularly.
yeah, they're fairly active. This was a hot topic for 2 charters ago when it was included in the Open Space Committee, and Anita was a big proponent of including it in the charter to give it the same status and continuity of like the Board of Ethics or the Police Commission. Doesn't have to be in the charter, but
But it can be by ordinance, right?
could be by ordinance.
Does that,
There already is an ordinance on open space, and the creation of the committee could be part of that.
does that take up a lot of town staff, Tom, or time?
No.
Okay.
I have to amend that. A fairly considerable amount of time was spent in coming up with an open space,
Policy.
both the policy and also literally, essentially a list of all the open space parcels in town.
The inventory.
Size and use and things like that. So, yeah, there's some background work that's taken a lot of time, but on meeting to meeting, there's not a lot of staff time.
Does anybody have any compelling reason to suggest that it should be eliminated?
If they meet regularly and are active, I don't see why
Open
you would.
space is a big issue.
In town,
In
it's a
town, I
big-
mean, so
Yeah.
you don't want to touch that one.
I think mostly moving forward, I think the issue isn't so much acquisition as it is stewardship. You know,
So I'll keep on that. Design Review Board. That was, so keep it separate.
well, we heard some comment on that this evening, right? We had also had discussions previously as to why it was moved. Because Ed, I think, as I understand, what you had said previously is they had started making almost like their own codes. It's sort of, and taking on authorities that weren't really there.
That was part of, and that was part of what Hegney told us when he was here last time.
Yeah. I'm not that familiar with some of the zoning issues, but I'd be inclined to leave it the way it is.
Is this a board that meets often? Is there a lot of staff time involved with the design review board? Or I know at one point in time, a few years ago, it was active. But where are they now, the design review board? I mean, you're right, I haven't heard that much about it either, but in terms of their meetings or in terms of...
I don't know that the frequency of meetings has changed, Lydia, and I think that they are, they're staffed by the planning staff.
Okay.
Are there any issues now as to reporting to being advisory to zoning?
Not from a staff perspective, I can say that, but I don't, again, that's, there are certainly opinions out there.
It is another meeting, though, that builders and developers have to go to, right?
Or would they have to go to it either way? Would that eliminate that?
No, unless you eliminate the board.
Most towns have some form of design review, advisory to the Planning and Zoning Commission, a combined commission. What's different here is the appointment by the zoning, in different terms of the charter, appointment by the zoning commission. Prior to its inclusion in the charter in the last commission, it was one of those temporary boards and commissions that the Board of Selectmen can appoint every 2 years as the need sees fit, as they see. It has historically been that since its creation. Design review committees or boards are fairly common these days in most advanced communities. They're entirely, legally, they're entirely advisory. They have no status in the Zoning Enabling Act, but they gain their status through things like charter provisions, and usually the rules, local rules for zoning require that a report of the Design Review Board be received prior to the action on a site plan or special permit at zoning.
A lot of it's aesthetics, right? I mean, that's kind of what they do. I mean, and they head off obvious problems, your signage is wrong and things like that.
It's aesthetics, it's design, it's site design, it's interior circulation, it's compatibility with the surrounding built environment. And I think that, because the zoning commission essentially can't look at the third dimension of a project, of a proposed building, and that's design review is intended to apply what are normally referred to as community standards and standards of good design and good architecture. Most sophisticated applicants expect to go to a design review board and find them to be very helpful, especially in things like site design, landscaping design, building design, architecture, compatibility with, and find them to be a very valuable proponent in front of the zoning commission, because if, you've seen this, the design review board comes in and says, we worked with this applicant, they've been very good to work with, and what they're presenting tonight is really in keeping with our design manual, and that's as an applicant, that's powerful testimony before the zoning commission. Takes a little work to get there, but
sure,
things that are built and approved are there for a very long time, so.
I would be very uncomfortable completely eliminating this commission for every reason you just outlined. I think there is a look and a feel to this town that I think we want to preserve, and they're a critical component. I think the question becomes, how is it working within zoning? And maybe I'm asking the same question, Tom, slightly differently, but sure, obviously, when they were moved to being advisory to zoning, there was clearly some angst and some noise there. But has that settled down? Have they kind of hit their stride about working together? Is there, and again, if you're not comfortable commenting, that's okay.
The best thing we could do in that this is, if you guys want to revisit this is something we probably should get you some testimony.
Yeah, I think so. And there's probably...
Do we want to revisit?
You probably need more than one side of an argument here. There are those who believe that having the zoning commission appoint the design review board has diluted its independence and its effectiveness. I don't say whether that's right or wrong. I'm just saying I've heard that argument. And from where you sit, you may want to hear all sides of that argument before you take any action or decide to take no action. Give everybody fair hearing.
Bob, it was fairly contentious at the last charter revision, wasn't it?
Yeah, and my recollection is the contention was having the zoning commission appoint it. And it's an outlier from the charter. It's the only appointed board or commission that isn't appointed by the Board of Selectmen. But that was done intentionally at the last charter revision commission for reasons that are probably in the minutes somewhere.
We got a lot on our plate. I'm not sure this one is calling my name now to bring them in. I know.
It's kind of touching a hot one.
Okay, so I'm showing 3 that we're holding off on now. Culture, Parks and Rec, Economic Development, and Design Review Board. And we'll set up a separate meeting.
Well, have we agreed to hold off on it, or did we want to, I mean, what's the consensus here? Do we want to just take no action on it?
It doesn't, to me, it doesn't seem like that we've given enough time for this design review board to filter out. So
That's what I'm saying, hold off on it and have another meeting.
I wouldn't even add it to an agenda item.
That's what I'm getting at. You want to hold it off for another meeting. I think what I'm hearing Tom say, look, the charter's only been, this provision's in the charter's only been there for, since it was adopted in 2013. Maybe we should just let it work and see how it works out.
I mean, I'm frankly fine with that. But I was getting a sense that maybe people wanted to discuss it more because there was a lot involved.
I think we'd be injecting ourselves into a planning and zoning.
So you want to make no recommendation?
I would move to make no recommendation on design review board.
Everybody comfortable? Okay, that's all.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay, so the two I've got then are Culture Parks and Rec and EDC. And that'll be a separate meeting sometime in the future.
Sorry, what further, is further information needed on the EDC, or is just further discussion?
I think
It's just further discussion.
Yeah, mainly discussion. Okay. Okay, next up, this should be fun. Review of information from council and possible action on length of board and commission terms. You came back to it.
Yes.
Okay.
This is fairly straightforward. 9-187B says very clearly, I think, that both the Board of Selectmen and the First Selectman can serve for 4-year terms. It's entirely up to you. If you want to, can't serve for 3-year terms, can't serve for 5-year terms, it's 2 or 4. And that's...
But the board can serve as 4, even though they're technically the legislative body, because I'd heard there was some discussion about if you're the legislature, you can only serve for 2.
Well, that's what I said last time, but then I said, let me check that against the statute.
I'm just going to clarify that.
And B says, section B, terms of elected chief executive officers, members of the Board of Selectmen, and members of the legislative body of any town shall be 2 years or 4 years from the date or dates on which such terms begin. I had it in my mind that I knew the chief elected official could be 4 years, the mayor or whatever, but for some reason I was not as certain about the legislative body, only because I don't know of any that are 4 years. For instance, Hartford, and the mayor's 4, and the city is 2. Bridgeport, same thing, I think. But it's clear to me that there's express authority to go to a 4-year term for the board. So.
This is actually one of the first things that caught my eye when I moved to Simsbury, that the first select person was running every 2 years, and if we got a new person in, by the time they kind of almost were getting their feet wet, they were also looking to, position themselves for the next election. So they really didn't have a chance to get in theory, if they had a series of policies which they were elected on, you never really get a chance to get into it before you're running again. So I strongly believe that at least the first select person should have a 4-year term. I'd frankly be comfortable with the entire body having a 4-year term, but I could see if people want to split it off. That's one way to go, but I think a 4-year term, particularly for the first select person, is really key, and particularly giving them some more experience in the office. Giving them a chance. So that's the Cliff Notes version of how I feel about that. Anybody? Anything? Agree, disagree, move on right there.
Well, I'm trying to think of,
The governor's...
based on our recommendation, whether they're going to be the chief executive officer or everything else, is that going to give us issues and terms?
I think it was a comment last time, was dependent upon how we land on the form of government will kind of drive.
And see, I almost think it could be independent of that, at least certainly for the first select person, that they could still be in office for 4 years, and then if we go to a town manager type, then they've got a consistency of knowing who they're working with. So maybe there's an advantage to that as well. I don't know.
I agree with you on the 4 years. I think this 2-year turnover is it's tiring, not only for the people who run, but, for...
4-year for the first selectman and the board,
yeah.
or just
I think 4 for the whole board.
the whole board?
Yes, I would support that.
You ask any of them that run, the 2 years just rolls over. You've just finished, completed running an election, and you have to prepare a year later for another election. It is, and in terms of these days of getting viable candidates to run and volunteers.
Do other towns have 4 years? Do we know?
I don't know of one. I know of a number of 4-year mayors and first selectmen. I can't think of one, and maybe we could call
Westport's
CCM.
Board of Selectmen is 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But how about the Board of Selectmen?
Yeah,
4 years?
the entire board is 4 years.
What happens in the year when the Board of Selectmen doesn't run? Because you have to have a municipal election every 2
Well, there's
years.
still a municipal election because you're
Right.
electing the RTM, or you're electing members of the Board of Finance, or because of the rotation.
Staggered-
different
your staggered
yeah.
election.
So you stagger the
Yeah.
terms.
Right.
Yeah.
You'd stagger the terms.
But the entire,
Except for the first.
but the entire Board of Selectmen runs every 4 years.
You would have to
That
keep
doesn't
the
stagger.
entire boards every 4 years. I don't know if you can stagger the Board of Selectmen.
No, I'm saying with the, okay.
Why not, Bob?
Well, it says, it doesn't say anything about staggering here. It says, shall be, the terms of office of the Board of Selectmen shall be 2 years or 4 years. I guess you could stagger them, because I think as a matter of local option, you probably could do that, but then you'd have 3 and 3.
You have 3 and 3.
Unless you have it
Nominate
as purely separate positions. Where if you're running for a select person, that's the job you're running for, and you don't have the opportunity, if you happen to get the third most votes, slide down to the rest of the
Nowhere to
board.
slide to.
That it's, one position is one election, and everything else is different.
I think for some reason it sounds difficult to stagger that for that reason.
Okay.
Because the first selectman is a member of the Board of Selectmen, and you can change that, but then you'd have a 5-member board and a first selectman who would serve on that would be a...
And I'm not suggesting stagger. I happen to like the idea of 4 years straight across the board. But I'm saying I could see where you could stagger it if you had to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not...
Do they stagger it?
Let me
No,
just play devil's
not on
advocate
their
a
Board of
little bit,
Selectmen.
though,
No.
if you
They
don't. I mean,
run
we heard
every
very
4 years.
eloquently
I got
about voter turnout. And on that off year, are people going to come out if the top slot is just the Board of Finance or Board of Ed, whatever that
Right.
top slot would be?
That would be a concern.
Either that, or you had that when you had the governor's race.
Right, exactly.
The municipal election was always the first, and then the others
Right.
you ran when it was the state election, the state or presidential.
I mean, you have enough trouble in local elections getting people to turn out even when there is a first
Yes.
election.
Yeah. And the point of the referendum, I mean, it's disgusting how few people actually turn out. I mean,
Dropping every year.
And you can look at it and say, well, that's a good sign, everybody's happy with what you're doing, but by the same token, it's like, come on, this is your chance to impact your local taxes.
That's why a lot of towns have gotten away from budget
Right.
referendum for that reason and gone to an initiative
Yeah.
petition procedure.
What are the terms of most of the other boards and commissions in town?
6 years.
I'm
Board of
just trying to
Finance
figure out a way
is 6.
to work them
Board of
into the
Finance is
national
6.
election scheme at the
Zoning
same time.
That's the only one.
The last charter revision actually changed that and turned the land use commissions to 4-year terms, I believe,
Right, they did.
because the thought was that the 6-year term was too long and was keeping people from agreeing to serve, because this day and age, it's hard to commit to 6 years to do anything. And by 4 years, people easier to commit, and also you'd get better turnover, pressure views and things, just like you talk about the Board of Ed now, the same discussion happened last time with the land use commissions. And you have had significant turnover in land use commissions in the last few years, I believe. Short answer is you can go to 4
Okay.
for both.
How are they going to get the information?
I think we gotta table this until we figure out what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
I don't see that, I don't see it changing my mind as to whether it's town manager or first select person. I really, we're talking about a lot about
Not-
continuity, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I mean, I think I'd just rather a little more time to think about it. Yeah.
We're going to end up with a
I think
very
in a way,
big
it's a good
table.
thing. What's that?
We're going to end up with a very big table.
I think we should have a meeting on a Saturday. We'll start at 8. Coffee and muffins.
Okay, so what's the consensus? Do we want to hold this off for another meeting, or do we feel we have enough votes now?
I like the 4-year, but I don't have any problem waiting.
I agree, I think waiting.
I mean, it'd be nice to have the two people at the table who, were in that role.
Right.
And hear what they have to
Have a little
say.
bit, I think you need a full board discussion
Okay,
for this.
so we're going to hold this off. Okay. And also, just to prepare for the next time we come back to this, it's not technically only the first selectman's position, or the selectman's position. It could also, be any other board or commission you want to look at, but just so you're aware of it. So we're just gonna hold on.
But if we did end up with a hybrid, then you've got that person in there for 4 years.
Yeah.
You can't get them out for 4 years. So that's what I mean. So we make a decision on that.
Right.
It's hard to make a decision on this. Small
think-
comment.
Right, one extends to the other.
Could impact the other.
Okay, next, review of information from council and possible action on selection and configuration of the Board of Education. And we have some paperwork on that.
So going back to my earlier comment on this,
Right.
trying to understand the comments from the public audience. And, I'm using my phrase, I'm trying to understand the business problem we're trying to solve here. And so is it term limits? Is it making sure that the voters have a say relative to the financial decisions made by the Board of Education, which is totally
Different, yeah.
it's handled totally different, So it sounded like the issue is, how do we ensure more integration of unaffiliated voters onto the Board of Ed? Because today, it's strictly the two parties nominate people. So how do you ensure that an unaffiliated is somehow nominated? So is it a matter of, is that a charter issue? Or is it a matter of, I think when I asked the question last time, how does an unaffiliated get on the ballot? It's through petitions and going out and getting,
signatures. They can do that.
signatures and what have you. And so is this a matter of education, educating the public on this? Is this really a charter issue, I guess?
I think that what I was hearing from the public, that's one aspect of it. Another thing was that they wanted to see some way of almost forcing some rotation on the members of the Board of Education. And that might be achieved by having 4 one time and 3 positions the next time, and you've got to hope that because you have uneven numbers, that eventually there's some kind of competition there. Which I think that's what they're also looking for. So it's not just, we're going to pick you 2 and that's the end of it and no discussion. But if you have an odd number, perhaps you're going to get a little competition there and somehow force some rotation. That's part of the equation, I think.
But that's something I'm not really sure what it is we're looking to solve.
Yeah,
I think there's, the board, Ed would tell you, there's a lot of value in having continuity on the board. People are knowledgeable of how the school system works and issues that looked at in the past. So I want to make sure we're addressing the issue. And I'm not sure what it is.
Hadley?
Yeah.
I'd like to ask Bob a question. Is there any charter provision that prohibits the parties from putting up more candidates than spots?
No. No, if you have 4 spots open, I believe it's, 3 and 3 for every, each municipal election on the board? Well, if you have 4 come up for re-election.
There's 8 members, right?
We have 8 members, so we have 4 and 4.
So there's 4, for each municipal election, there's 4 seats that need to be filled. If both parties nominate 4 candidates for those 4 seats, then you've got 8 people running for 4 seats. I think what we're hearing and what the practice has been is the parties each nominate 2. Nobody loses. I think that's apparently an agreement between the parties. It's not in the charter and it's not in state law, certainly.
But if one party didn't want to abide by it, they didn't have to.
Of course not. They could have nominated as many open seats as there are, or if a group of unaffiliated voters believe that there needed to be change on the Board of Ed, they could create a minor party.
Which has
happened. And run a full slate, and then let the democratic process play out.
Isn't that how Bernie Sanders got elected in Vermont first? He was an independent first.
He was a socialist. He was a socialist mayor of
Burlington.
City of Burlington.
Then when he went into the Senate, he went in
as an independent, caucused with the Democrats, and there was an interesting legal issue in some states, because the state of Vermont, how is this? You don't have to declare a party when you register to vote. So in some states you do, and the question was, could he get on certain state ballots because he was not in the Democratic primaries because he was not a Democrat? And apparently have worked that out because he appears to be on all the ballots. But anyway, having said all that, having said all that about the current process allows for competition, it seems to me that you could, if you chose to, change the makeup of the Board of Ed in terms of its member and its rotations to almost induce, you could create a 9-member Board of Ed where 3 members would come up, an odd number of members would come up each year, because then the parties would be forced to nominate 3 and 3. I do think that if you change the makeup of the Board of Ed, either its number or its rotation, it would encourage competitive elections if you chose to do that, because just think about it. If there's 3 seats that came up each election, there would be 2 from one party, 1 from another, or in the future it could be an unaffiliated, and parties, because it's an even number, you can have this agreement that you'll nominate 2, and everybody wins. If there was 3, it'd be more difficult to do that, I think, because someone would have to nominate 1 and someone would have to nominate 2. But that would be the result of a change of the rotation. That's not written into the charter now. It's not written into state law. It's really part of the political culture of the town, and that's really sort of beyond your responsibility, other than to suggest that you heard testimony, repeated testimony about the need to do that and encourage, parties to revisit it or something. You could put it in your report in that way, or you could change the makeup of the Board of Ed to encourage more competitive elections. Seems to me if you had a 9-member board, and if you wanted to rotate every 2 years, you could do 4 1 year and 5 in another. As long as it was an uneven number in one of those years, it would be difficult to continue the non-competitive election process.
But you still have the issue of how does an unaffiliated get on the ballot? That process doesn't change.
The parties, that's a matter of state law and party rules in Connecticut. I don't know if a party in Connecticut can nominate someone who's not a member of the party. Having said that, there's nothing in the charter or nothing in the state law that says any number of unaffiliated voters or voters who aren't members of parties have an opportunity to run for any office they choose by following the statutory procedures, which require petitions and submission of petitions, but not that many. How many do you have to submit? How many signatures on a petition do you have to
1%.
1%.
You need 54.
54, so
54
signatures.
54 signatures. I had to get 61 to run.
So it's a low barrier.
It's a low barrier.
So is it more of an education process,
threshold is
awareness that needs to be taken into account? I mean, I don't know.
So there's already a mechanism.
Right, but trying to understand the concern that people are raising, and it sounded like the biggest concern was, how do you get unaffiliated people on the ballot?
Well, that was one of their concerns. I think
That was one of the
we've
concerns.
had three pieces, between term limits, have an election, and also bring in, the unaffiliated.
I mean, that's the biggest concern, is this ritualistic dance we do, because we're not electing anybody. I mean, it's hard to even congratulate somebody. Congratulations.
We're not the only town.
It's a fairly common practice.
Fairly common practice.
Because they want to depoliticize.
The logic behind it is take the Board of Ed outside the political arena, but that's
Maybe we should
positive
disappoint it then.
characterization of it. The negative characterization of it is you're not really having a true election because nobody loses. There's no winners and losers. There's no public choice there because whoever appears on the ballot with the party affiliation next to their name ends up staying on the so-called elected body.
So you depoliticize, but it's completely political. So it's, it's two things clashing.
But in terms of what you can do, you could change the structure of the body, and thereby the result of that, I believe, would be to make that agreement more difficult to enforce.
Because if you have it at 9 people and you have staggered terms, 4 and 5 or whatever, if people in town are unhappy with the way the Board of Ed is being, quote, run by the particular party in power, then they can vote and get the other party in power. So at least you can have that change.
Or a minor party that created better
that's-
education for Simsbury or something,
Right.
who puts up their own slate, and it's
Exactly.
easier to win 3 than it is to win
Or
9.
even a slot
Right.
out of the 9, when you have more competition.
And you had that very recently, where a number of minor party candidates did win in significant.
Yeah, so there is a mechanism.
There is a mechanism that's already
The one thing
there in
I keep
place.
going, and I respect what the folks who have come here have said, well thought out, and I just go back in my mind is, we got a #1 school system. And it's not like we got a real problem as far as the school, the quality of education, where our kids go after high school. I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna keep looking back at, we got a major issue on town manager, no town manager. And, all these other things sort of are just eating up so much of our time.
None
look
of their
how much time we
comments
just-
talked about the school system as far as what they were turning out through an education process. What they were talking about is fiscal management.
Which the
You have a check
manager might try, we might bring a lot of fiscal
You also
reality.
have- Well, not really though,
Board of
because
Finances is also in place, so to be the physical.
you got a Board of
responsibility.
Finance that acts as the check there.
Right.
And believe me, we've had a lot of meetings where the Board of Finance people and the Board of Ed people don't see eye to eye.
But we did hear the West Hartford consolidation.
Well, again, okay, so you have, let's bring that up. You got somebody in the corner over here who's not only the finance person for the town, but also the facilities manager. Or you got somebody downstairs who's not only the director of finance, but also the treasurer. Okay? So are you going to merge those into one? Or are you still going to have a treasurer for the town? All right, and then, so that means you really haven't saved much. All right, you pushed function over to somebody in the corner there who's already got a plate full without a whole lot of help, so that you then have to get an assistant there. Those are the things that I went, and I heard what they said, technology and all that stuff. We've already done all that stuff. So,
Mary said we have 2 IT departments.
well, that doesn't say, I'm talking about finance. I'm talking about from a finance standpoint. That's not to say you can't merge some of the IT and payroll and some of those other
There's some
things.
efficiencies to be gained.
Right.
I mean, there's always efficiencies that can be accomplished between upstairs, downstairs, and 2 departments, but that's within the purview of upstairs, downstairs, in particular to this district and to this town. And they do well, they
At
do
least here, we're
work.
in the same building.
Right,
Some other
which
towns,
is a big
We're not even in the
plus.
same building.
Have to look at each other every day. It helps.
We do, and
It does help.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I know that.
Smile.
It seems we should do something to address at least part of the outcry. I don't know, can you, is it feasible to just create a couple of unaffiliated specific slots that will stay that way? So there won't be a fear that they're going to take over the party's positions?
The charter doesn't designate the offices. You won't find the words Republican or Democrat anywhere in the charter. It talks about minority representation rule, which only says that no more than X number of members of any elected board can be from one political party. So it really isn't an issue for the charter.
Even if you created it, you still have the problem of who's going to run, and if they're not motivated to go get the 54 signatures.
And then who picks them? Right now, for unaffiliated spots, the parties pick the unaffiliated.
I understood that.
Yeah.
The other thing's a farce.
And it's usually asking with great search, to undercover those names. Because we've also been turned down in our parties when we do ask, because we know we have to fill these slots. So it isn't always that first person is right there.
Actually, the only mention in the charter of political affiliation is the Board of Ethics, which says, no more than, I think it requires a certain number of unaffiliated voters.
In that one, I think the Board of Selectmen picks that. One member of each party agrees upon one person. So again, that's...
What say our two Board of Ed members? I mean, is it... I've watched a few meetings. I don't know why. No, I've watched a few meetings.
Had a hard time sleeping.
They don't seem overly partisan to me. Is that an understatement, overstatement?
I think being a member of the board and a long-serving member of the board, when we want to talk about, the nonpartisan, is because in this particular board, which makes this board work so well, which makes the school district, and Jeff's got a lot of statistics here, the district that we are, is because we do not let the political nature of who we are, who we represent, even on our name tags, no one knows who we are. In fact, our superintendent did not know who we were when he came in when we were hired him here. That is, I think, the beauty of this particular district, because we are a model board in how we conduct business in this room. And Jeff can jump in at any time, to other districts around the state, because it is not a political board. Politics do not enter into the agenda, into the decisions. We are strictly a board that sets the policy, we craft the budget, hopefully it passes. We have a very good relationship, and I've been on this board a while, with the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen. And that is very, very crucial to the workings of this board, not just during budget time, but the whole year long. And that's something you just don't see in other districts. I mean, these are the success stories of a very well-run, oiled machine called this Board of Education for the town of Simsbury. And that's something that, we take pride on that. We as board members that are on that board, we are committed. We are committed to the right thing, for the students of Simsbury, for the town of Simsbury. And we work very, very hard that we push forward what needs to be done. And Jeff, you can jump in.
Sure.
Got...
Just to build on what Lydia has said too, when you have a depoliticized board, for lack of a better term, the staff appreciates that, right? Because the superintendent doesn't come in saying, who am I going to be working for on any given year, and there's certainly some continuity and stability, as we've been talking about, through the budgeting process or through what have you. So there's a security from the superintendent and the staff that I don't think you're going to get in other towns, because they're not sure, what fight is going to result in next. Just to build on something that Paul said, let me just throw a couple of stats at you, just to reflect on the good job. And yeah, we've heard a lot about one of the flagship issues of this town is our school system, and that is certainly reflected in the rankings that we have received. Niche, which is a school ranking firm, research firm, has ranked the Simsbury as the best school district, the best middle school, and the best high school in the Metro Hartford area. And actually, I can amend that and say what came out today, Niche ranked our school system as the 4th best in the state and the 37th best in the country. So and one more, Newsweek had Simsbury High School as the 5th best high school in Simsbury. So we are doing something right. Is the relationship, is the way we get there, the way the sausage is made unconventional? Absolutely. But it is working. And what I'm hearing, actually, is a need for increased public engagement. Now, we can work with that, right?
Right.
All of our meetings have actually not one public audience, but 2. There's an avenue there. You can comment on the budget, and I would actually argue that we've had some serious fiscal restraint over the last few years, and I'm happy to get into that if we want to. Look at our budget increases. And they've been very sensitive to the declining enrollment. And so what's going on is I think you will have that system. And when you inject politics in this, and this is what I said last time, is it just changes the game, right? I'm not saying that the Simsbury residents can't make an informed vote. Of course I'm not saying that. But it just changes the nature of the discussion, right? Because politics is behind it. Now your number one focus may not be the school system. Maybe what your position is. What's the party's telling you? Is this going to be, am I going to pay for this at the polls? It just changes the debate. It just frames it differently. Thank you.
And I think also speaking in terms of the continuity, and when we, in terms of, term limits or terms and things. I know Stratford has term limits, and it has been very, very difficult within a Board of Education, within a town, for the superintendent, when you have Board of Education members that are forced off because of term limits. This board, the beauty is that you have veteran board members like me, but you also have new board members, as Jeff is, on the board. And because of that, there is always going to be a continuity that grows with the board, but also mentors the other board members to as they come forward with things. And I think when you have the continuity of someone on a board, and I'll speak for myself because I am past president of Connecticut Association of Boards of Ed, I am past chair of Capital Region Education Council, and I am now on the National School Board Association Boards of Directors. That adds a lot of credence. I didn't just get there because of my good looks. I got there because I had a board behind me, supportive of that in a school system to work not only at a local level, but at state level and also federal level. And that only encompasses, and I'll point over here to all of the awards and things, we got that because of our working relationship as a board and because of bringing this board into a state level, into a federal level. So it solidifies and really codifies the workings of your Board of Education to where we want to be. So, we're not content in just, laying back and letting grass grow under our feet. We're good, but we can get better. And how do you get better? And we have a lot of these, approaches that we use and that we take, and they have worked out for this Board of Education.
It's not like you got 100 people lining up to volunteer to be on the board as well.
No, you don't. And that is something that not only in this board, but around the state, around the country.
You'd have fewer if they had to launch a campaign, raise funds, put up signs, all of that. I mean, it's hard to get people to want to go through that.
So if I understand the concern, it's how do you get more unaffiliated people on the board, and there's a mechanism already in place, a process in place for that to occur. I'm not sure, again, is this a charter issue? Do we need to do anything?
I don't think you really need to. I think the mechanism is already there.
I'm not sure how would you phrase the request to make a charter change?
I think
I'm at a loss.
Boz basically said the only thing that we could do is fiddle with the number to break the pact, so to speak. I read the charge to our commission, it's not on here, so this one is brought by the public, which we, respect and should respect, and we've heard the public out on it. And I hear them loud and clear, and I don't particularly like the little dance I do when I go in the voting booth either on the Board of Ed.
But I don't know a better way.
I think we'll leave it.
Does anybody want to make a motion, or we leave it as is and figure out a way to encourage the public to get more involved and possibly form a third party if they're that dissatisfied with what's going on? I don't know.
Our recommendation to the board can include other things besides just charter, whether it's ordinance or it's just information or something like that. So I think we need to address this in our report to the board.
So we could decline to take action, but provide comment and feedback from what we're hearing.
Yeah, because it's important that, as you said, we had a lot of interest in this particular one. We have to do something on it. We can't just leave it that.
Yeah, I
That
think
is,
make it
because they need to know that's what the public is saying too, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Next item, discussion, possible action of Board of Finance, duty of care standard for pension plan investments in Section 808 of the Charter.
What a one to potentially end the meeting on.
Yeah, Bob, what's this all? This was handled in the last charter meeting.
Yeah. Bob, you want to run this by us, please?
Yeah.
In English?
You want to give
Sure.
You want to give the Board of Finance more responsibility?
I don't have the charter section in front of me.
I have it right here if you want it.
Do you? Can I have it? I can tell you what was added last time. Well, it's the bold language was added. Board of Finance shall supervise and maintain the town pension and other post-employment benefits, etc. Board of Finance acting as prudent fiduciary, and I think that's where we our starting point here, shall, after consultation with the Board of Education, Board of Selectmen, and then you read the rest of it. That phrase prudent fiduciary has certain legal connotations and may create a higher standard of care for the Board of Finance than is required by state law. State law, and you have it here in your materials, follows a prudent investor rule. There's a statute that defines what that is, and I think the thought was that referencing state law, rather eliminating the phrase prudent fiduciary and replacing it with the standard of care that comes out of the general statutes is maybe a prudent thing to do, so that you're not potentially holding the Board of Finance and their responsibilities to a higher standard of care than is required by state law. Now, why is that important? Because you could conceivably have some sort of action brought if something goes wrong, and you could have some action brought against the town, and the court would probably apply the higher standard of care as expressed in your charter than the standard that's set out in the statute, and be more difficult to defend the actions of the Board of Finance, whatever they may be against that higher standard of care.
Why was that?
Trial lawyer's dream.
Why was that added? Why was that wording added at the last charter?
This language came out of an issue that was before the last Charter Revision Commission. Can I see that
Sure.
language again?
I mean, I've got some background on this, obviously, but
You have background. You know where this came from, I think.
Yeah.
And there was a
I'm
question.
just not quite sure why the wording that was put in there a couple years ago isn't sufficient now.
Well, it's more than sufficient. We're opening ourselves up to a higher standard of care than state law requires. If you say, the Board of Finance acting as, use a statutory phrase rather than prudent fiduciary, acting in accordance with 7-450, you would incorporate the statutory standard of care into the charter rather than this higher standard, potentially
Okay, so you're just saying back it down a little bit.
Back it down a little bit,
Down.
so that you don't create a higher burden on the town for defending an action.
But it still allows the Board of Finance to have
I wouldn't change
say in
anything,
the-
I'm not suggesting any change to that section other than the phrase, pension, the Board of Finance acting as a prudent fiduciary, you replace it with acting in accordance with General Statute 7-450A and the prudent investor rule.
If I may, just, one of the reasons that was moved over to the Board of Finance was because when the financial crisis hit, all right, there was a lot of discussion around not only making the ARC, the actuarial required contribution, but what the return on investment assumption should be. And given that if you lower the return assumption, it raises your contributions. And given some of the financial constraints that the boards were under, both the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance felt that they weren't taking sufficient action to back the number down from 8%, I think that was the number it was, down to, well, I wanted to go to 4.5, but nobody wanted to go there because it would have really raised it up. But anyway, so there was a discussion about being able to have some more authority for the Board of Finance to be able to adjust that number and make sure that we were not only meeting our obligations to the unions, which I felt was very important, but also that we were going to be able to fulfill those commitments and have the right amount. And as it turns out, we did start actually lowering that number down in increments. I'm not quite sure, I've been out for 2 years, I'm not quite sure where it is now, but that's why I think that was really put in there to allow some more authority.
And the issue is, do you put it with the Board of Finance, do you put it with the Board of Selectmen, and the Charter Revision Commission opted to put it
Because
with
the Board of Ed, right,
Finance.
because the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen, were hesitant to do that. Which I can understand. I mean, it's their budgets, they didn't want to have to raise them. And so the Board of Finance was given a little bit more authority to say, yeah, sorry, but this is what you got to do.
Did the issue come up recently in some context?
No, it hasn't. And actually, what ended up coming out of all that was, of course, the retirement plan committee that we put together, which had representatives from the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, and Board of Education. And that group, fortunately, was able to work together to lower the interest.
And I think that group reports to the Board of Finance now.
It's appointed by the Board of Selectmen, but the goal is that you have, I mean, you served on it, you were the chair of the Board of Finance. If it was certainly clear that if there was any recommendation or action taken by the Retirement Plan Committee that wasn't acceptable to the Board of Finance, the Board of Finance would clearly have had the authority to change it.
Right.
So it basically ended up being the buck stops here. Operationally, it came at a time when we were cleaning house for a variety of reasons. After 2008, we hired an independent advisor to help us with the, which we'd had for the OPEB, interestingly, but we expanded their role to cover the pension committees, and it's worked very well since. But that was what I understood was really where the buck stops.
Yeah, and if you're interested in pursuing this further, the phrase would be to delete acting as a prudent fiduciary and replace it with acting in compliance with the prudent investor rule was set forth in sections 45A, which is statutory language, and then have FIC, is it FIC? FIA review it, because they're the independent investor advisor, and say, what do you think? Is this consistent with practice of other towns? Because our concern is this phrase, prudent fiduciary, is a higher standard than the statute requires.
Right.
So you're going to take it out of the precedential value of all the cases under the state law, and you're going to throw it into, well, who has a similar clause like this? Oh, there's this one in California, and then it's all over.
That's exactly right.
And I think the risk, Tom, is that people will say, well, let's take a look at ERISA, and we'll use that standard.
And the legal obligations of a fiduciary are probably much broader than the legal obligations.
And they're
the statute.
changing all the
And they're
time.
changing all the
They're being
time. and-
broader.
Or whatever
I
a
think
creative
that's
lawyer
prudent.
can figure out.
Yeah, that word fiduciary is,
His mind's already going.
I think it's a no-brainer. I move to make the recommendation to make that change.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Bob and Tom. That was a good catch there.
well, actually, I should have caught it 2 years ago.
Good point.
We'll be lining out that item on the billing statement.
Before we go to the discussion of future agenda items, I know we promised that we would have a second public audience. So, ma'am?
I'll get out of the way here.
Kindly all state your affiliation and your name so I can check you off on my list to start with.
Oh, no.
Republican?
Republican.
Check.
Jeff Tyndall, Democrat.
Lydia Tadone, Republican.
Hadley Rose, independent.
Mary Glassman, Democrat. Tom Beneke, Republican.
You need a shave, Mayor.
Jim Ray, independent.
Oh, James, right.
Ed Pavich, Republican.
I'm Bob Crowther, independent.
Thank you.
Okay, that was
And then you
easy.
had three members who aren't here this evening, who are
Melissa is.
Melissa Osborne,
Osborne's
Democrat.
Is Democrat.
Melissa also.
Anita Mueller,
Is,
Democrat,
oh,
and Mary
was she?
Glassman,
Okay,
Democrat.
Yes.
yeah, I didn't even know what Anita was. Okay.
Mary and Anita are Democrats.
And
They must be at
Just
a
have a
Bernie Sanders
question.
rally, I'm assuming.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
and one question.
what?
No question.
I'm sorry, you had a question?
I believe, I don't know, but the Director of Human Resources was added 4 years ago. Salary of 97,000. Or at least, I'm sorry, he makes 97,000 now. That was when the survey was done. I think the survey was between 4,500 and 5,000, to my last knowledge. Now, if that was done in 2010 or 2011, could the town have used that money if it had been accelerated for other purposes? I mean, I know this is more of a...
Yeah, it's really,
What if
it's more of a Board of Finance question. It's not
Finance.
really anything to do with the charter revision.
Okay, and the other question, that's what I figured. But as far as I understand, I don't know when your next meetings are gonna be. And the notes, I don't understand what statute. Maybe I should ask the lawyer. I was told it was a statute that the minutes did not have to be posted until, 24 hours in advance or something?
The minutes or the agenda? Yeah.
The minutes of the agenda, exactly.
The minutes.
You-
And technically,
The minutes.
The minutes are what happened at the last meeting. The agenda is what's coming up at the next
right,
meeting.
none of that had to be posted until 24 hours prior to.
And
That's
Bob's
OIA.
nodding his head.
General Statutes 1-200 something.
Right, okay, general statutes, because I'm gonna look it up.
General Statutes 1-200.
200, it starts with
It
200.
starts with 200, that's where it starts, and it defines meetings, it defines the conduct of meetings. It's in there.
Okay, and I'm gonna ask the board, isn't there a chance that some of this could be posted a little more in advance?
Sometimes we've actually tried to do that, okay? We have posted the agenda earlier, but occasionally we're still juggling it to make sure we can fit it in.
Because I know I asked for the minutes of what was gonna be on the agenda, and I prefer not to have a computer at home. I didn't see them, and as far as my knowledge of this town is, which I have spoken at a few financial meetings, as you know, Paul, none of it's like it's not posted so that the public can see.
It's
So
posted on the
why-
bulletin board downstairs. It's got to be posted there, otherwise we don't have the meeting.
Right.
And it is.
Some people
Right.
do have trouble getting out of their driveways in the ice.
And they also
Some
is on,
people-
it's on the website under the
Right.
It's
agenda.
under the link.
It's under both areas.
And some of the descriptions of past meetings are not posted till the very last minute. And I found this to be true in 2 states already, because I've been working on it in multiple states. Because it all boils down to money, basically. And I do realize town manager's position, I didn't realize if I caught it correctly, is she making 75,000 or 70,000, which I was quoted today?
75.
75.
75, I was quoted 70 today.
First selectman.
First
First
selectman.
selectman makes 75
Yeah.
now.
75 now.
Yes.
Okay, so that changed. And yet, I'm gonna be spending a lot of time reading that, study that they did in 2010. Because I got a lot of time on my hands, right in, Town Hall, because I know it's a long study.
Which study are you referring to?
It was
The
not
one-
2000, she's talking about the Erdman
The Erdman
study,
study?
which was the 2013, I believe.
2013, I believe there was another study prior to that was done so that the human resources position was created.
No other studies were done, at least while I've been here. I've been here since 2010. That's the only human resources study that's been done.
Right, I think that's the only one.
Okay,
Okay.
that clarifies
As
a
it
little
relates to
bit.
personnel.
I'm sorry?
As it relates to personnel.
As it relates to everything, yes.
No, it doesn't relate to everything. It relates to personnel.
It just
The
relates
Erdman
to,
report relates to personnel.
and salaries.
Salaries were part of the study, that's correct.
Yes,
Right.
personnel salaries.
And the human resources position was created in 2010, from what I understand. Or 2011. I'm gonna find that out.
When you go to the Board of Selectmen, you can ask them, that's more under their
I'm
purview.
going to.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Is that it?
No, I just wanna know when your next meeting's
Oh,
gonna be.
Well, we were just,
And where.
They're on the calendar.
Here?
They worked on the calendar as of yesterday.
They are,
I
in
beg to
fact,
differ.
they are in fact on the electronic calendar. They're filed with the town clerk as they have to be regular meetings. The next meeting is on March 3rd. And it will be in this room.
In this room.
At 5:30.
it's a Thursday.
Yeah. Oh, it's always the first and third Thursday.
No, I'm just talking about,
I'm talking
I gotta go to
about
Florida, so
March 3rd.
I'm just working on it.
Thursday.
We have
I go to
two.
Florida.
two business, at least.
And Tom, the following meeting is March 17, I
No golf.
believe.
No clubs?
No fun.
St. Patrick's Day.
Right.
Okay, now, future agenda items. I need a consensus here now. On the town manager piece, we're going to get some language and some clarifications from Bob, hopefully by the middle of next week. Do you think we will be able to discuss this and vote on it at the next meeting? I mean,
We'll give it a shot.
I was going to say, that at a certain point, there's,
Can I make a
there's too much, becomes too much
We have
information.
2 meetings left.
There's, I mean, words are nice, and we've had a good discussion, everything else, but at some point in time, putting things on paper, to me, is extremely helpful. And I know, Tom, when we had initially had a conversation, he had a pros and cons sheet, which I think was helpful. It starts to frame
Right.
the issues better. And so, as we were talking, in my mind, I'm visualizing some sort of matrix that says, Bob listed some things
Right.
about, who makes the appointments, who decides the budgets, and so you could list topics of responsibilities, if you will.
Right.
And then say, under this form of government, then here's how this works, and under this form of government, here's how it might work.
My
And-
materials.
Yeah.
that-
Such that, now you can start looking at it and start to, we can all agree, this is how, this is how
Bob
this
is
is
going to do
going
that
to
as
work.
part of
feel
his
like an
information.
executive
that doesn't-
summary, have
Right.
the charter language, which is sort of the trees, but also have the forest. Here's the change, here's the current situation.
Right.
Here's the proposed, and cover all the
For both forms, Bob? For town manager and for hybrid?
Could do that.
Yeah, I think it would be.
That would be very helpful.
Something that would just, we all look at it and we agree, this,
Right,
is-
and then
you
we
know,
can
that's how this one
discuss
would work.
the
and then we
various
can-
aspects and see what works.
Almost, and then we can have like a pros and cons
Yeah.
kind of discussion with that and start to fill that out as we go through this.
Who's not going to be here on the 3rd?
I do not know.
I'll be
that.
here.
You will be here.
I was just working on what the date was.
Tom, I believe I did, when I did the last survey, everyone was going to be available on the 3rd.
Yeah, because that was the one where I said to everybody, we're going to vote on it. Right.
So maybe do you want to have just a single agenda item?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking of, yeah. The other thing I'm thinking of, just to run this by everybody, because this is a big issue to a number of people, do we want to start, as long as it's going to be a single agenda item, do we want to start it at 6:30 to give more of the public the opportunity to be here? Is any...
Huntley raises that because we did get a request for that from a member of the public earlier today.
Does that inconvenience anybody on the commission? 6:30 instead?
I'd rather start at 5:30, to be honest with you.
Because if we do have to continue later into the evening,
Yeah,
it may be
that's why I'm
very
asking.
long.
In the end, there'll be, we still have to do a public session
You guys
later
do a
on
public
anyway,
hearing.
so I
Right.
mean, there's still gonna be, and that one is later. So.
Okay, we're going to keep it at 5:30 then? Okay. And so that'll be next, and then we have one meeting scheduled now after that, right?
Correct.
What, 17th? Hopefully, we can put together all the little odds and ends that are still floating out there, and if worse comes to worse, we're going to need another meeting or two, special meeting. But,
I have a running amended charter. I haven't printed it out because it's a lot of paper, but
maybe you can
taken.
send out an electronic version at least, maybe?
Sure.
You know, or maybe, is there a way to just isolate the changes that we so far
I
have plugged in?
footnote them all. I put them all
Okay.
underlined, I think, and then there's a footnote
Okay.
referencing the date you made the change.
You know, it'd be great if with that, oh, you're going to footnote at the very end saying this clause, that clause, whatever?
Well, I do it at the bottom of the page.
Okay.
So if, for instance, the elimination of the commission, I strike it out,
Okay.
footnote, say eliminated at such and such
Okay.
meeting. I'll send you the copy. We can
Yeah,
play with
please.
the format.
That'd be
One
great.
arcane point
I love arcane
of all the
points. Yeah,
arcane
please.
points is, I don't know if anybody is bothered, but the lack of an index on our charter makes me crazy. I don't know if anybody else is bothered.
I agree.
But, like, you know, I'm
I
trying to
agree.
find
Yeah,
that. Like, I have to
you gotta
read
go
the
through
whole.
everything.
I have to read the whole charter to find one section. So, can we get an index? You got a great staff person who can put that together.
Actually, the code book, and I know you don't have the code book, the code book has a very nice index, but it's both the charter and the code of ordinances.
Maybe we could split that off and get the Microsoft Word version, because that makes me crazy when I got to thumb through it.
You know, I think that, I don't think it's been done this way, but you could have a special code service that does the.
Yeah, I was thinking we might ask the service.
You could ask the service to actually produce, because the charter that everybody looks at is sort of produced in-house.
Right.
What you have in front of you, the one that's on file in the town clerk's office is that one. It might make sense to do a real charter with the municipal code service who would index it, and with many towns, and also by doing that, they also put it on their website.
Could be my proudest accomplishment on the board, is getting the index done.
Progress.
Okay, move to adjourn, somebody?
So move.
Second.
There we go. Any objections? We're done.
Thanks,
Thank you.
folks.
You're welcome.
No objection.
Well, Mrs. Cole, how are you?